Kính thưa quý vị, chỉ còn vài phút nữa thì Ngày hội Công nghệ Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh 2025 Convention 2025 kỷ nguyên cộng hưởng blockchain và AI sẽ diễn ra trong ít phút nữa. Kính mời tất cả quý vị vui lòng di chuyển vào khán phòng và ổn định chỗ ngồi để chương trình sớm được bắt đầu. Xin chân thành cảm ơn. Ladies and gentlemen, the Ho Chi Minh City Technology Festival 2025 Convention 2025 will begin in a few minutes. Please kindly make your way into the ballroom and take your seats. Thank you very much. Quý vị thân mến, phiên buổi chiều của Ngày hội Công nghệ Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh 2025 Convention 2025 sẽ được diễn ra trong ít phút nữa. Kính mời tất cả quý vị vui lòng di chuyển vào khán phòng và ổn định chỗ ngồi để chương trình sớm được bắt đầu. Xin chân thành cảm ơn. Ladies and gentlemen, our afternoon session will begin in a few minutes. Please kindly make your way into the ballroom and take your seats. Thank you very much. Quý vị thân mến, chỉ còn ít phút nữa phiên buổi chiều của chúng ta sẽ được diễn ra. Xin mời quý vị chúng ta nhanh chóng di chuyển vào ballroom, ổn định vị trí để chương trình sớm được diễn ra. Xin chân thành cảm ơn. Ladies and gentlemen, our afternoon session will begin shortly. Please make your way to the ballroom. Thank you. Đại biểu quý diễn giả và toàn thể quý khách, chào mừng quý vị đang quay trở lại với sân khấu Innovation Stage của Ngày hội Công nghệ Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh Convention 2025. Hy vọng quý vị đã có một buổi nghỉ trưa thật là dễ chịu và thời gian nghỉ ngơi thoải mái để chúng ta nạp đầy năng lượng cho buổi chiều ngày hôm nay. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, speaker and attendees. Welcome back to the Innovation Stage at Ho Chi Minh City Tech Festival, Conviction 2025. We hope you had enjoyable lunch and refreshing break. Buổi chiều ngày hôm nay thì chúng ta sẽ cùng tiếp tục khám phá những góc nhìn chiến lược của chủ đề Tương lai của tài chính phi tập trung. This afternoon, we will dive deeper into the strategic and technological frontiers of our central theme, The Future of Decentralized Finance. Và để mở đầu cho phiên chiều nay thì chúng ta sẽ đến với một chủ đề đang nhận được rất nhiều sự quan tâm trong bối cảnh thị trường crypto đang chuyển mình mạnh mẽ. Xin mời quý vị chúng ta hãy cùng đến với lợi thế của nhà đầu tư cá nhân trong bối cảnh mới của thị trường crypto. To kick off this afternoon, let's explore a topic of great relevance as the crypto market evolves. How retail investors can win in the new crypto market reality. Và quý vị thân mến, lúc này thì Hồng Vân xin trân trọng được giới thiệu diễn giả đến với buổi chiều của chúng ta ngày hôm nay. Ông Đông Phạm, nhà sáng lập STC Capital, một trong những gương mặt tiêu biểu trong cộng đồng đầu tư crypto tại Việt Nam, người đã đồng hành và quan sát làn sóng DeFi ngay từ những ngày đầu tiên. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our speaker, Mr. Đông Phạm, founder of STC Capital, a prominent figure in Vietnam's crypto investment scene and an early observer of the DeFi wave. Xin một tràng vỗ tay dành cho speaker của chúng ta.
Xin chào mọi người, cũng rất là lâu rồi mình mới trở lại sân khấu, nhưng là nhớ không nhầm thì tháng 3 năm 2023 tới giờ, lâu rồi không nói, cho nên là chắc hôm nay là nó cũng hơi hồi hộp, cho nên có gì thì anh chị em thông cảm. Cũng xin giới thiệu mình là Đông Phạm, người sáng lập cái cộng đồng Sài Gòn Trade Coin từ 2017. Và tới 2021 thì chúng mình có lập cái quỹ đầu tư mạo hiểm, đấy là STC Capital. Hôm nay cái chủ đề hôm nay mình muốn nói là mình thì chuyên về thị trường, cho nên mình chỉ nói về xoay quanh cái vấn đề thị trường tài sản số mà trước đây thì gọi là thị trường tiền ảo hoặc là thị trường crypto. Thì trong cái tình hình nếu mà anh chị em mới vào thị trường khoảng 2 năm nay thì chúng ta sẽ thấy là thị trường tài sản số nó biến động, tức là cái thực trạng hiện nay nó biến động mà chúng ta khó có thể nhận định. Tất cả những kiến thức trước đây đem áp dụng vào cái giai đoạn thị trường hiện nay là rất khó để kiếm tiền, mà thậm chí còn khó giữ tiền. Thì cái nội dung tôi nói trong vòng 15 phút thì nó cũng không nói được nhiều, nhưng mà đại để là nó xoay quanh cái nội dung là cái thực trạng thị trường crypto hiện nay và cái lợi thế của nhà đầu tư cá nhân. Trong cái giai đoạn này thì chúng ta nên làm gì để kiếm được lợi nhuận ở thị trường tài sản số. Đầu tiên đấy thì cái tôi trình bày về cái thực trạng cái thị trường tài sản số cái giai đoạn hiện nay rất là bế tắc cho các nhà đầu tư cá nhân. Ở đây tôi chỉ nói ở cái phạm trù nhà đầu tư cá nhân thôi nhé, chứ không nói nhà đầu tư tổ chức ở cái slide này. Thì đầu tiên là cái nhà đầu tư cá nhân á, rất là bối rối. Đầu tiên là những cái công việc như là làm airdrop. Thì cái airdrop gần đây á, là nó bị biến tướng. Trước đây airdrop là những cái dự án người ta dùng token, người ta trả phần thưởng cho những người trải nghiệm sản phẩm, dùng thử sản phẩm và quảng bá sản phẩm. Thì gần đây á, cái airdrop nó trở thành công cụ marketing cho các cái dự án blockchain. Nó không còn cái ý nghĩa là trả cái reward cho nhà đầu tư, cho người dùng thử nữa. Hoặc là thậm chí có những cái dự án, cái giai đoạn vừa rồi có cái dự án là airdrop biến tướng thành scam. Tức là làm airdrop nhưng mà lại phải trả một phần phí, mà đến khi nhận được cái reward á, thì cái reward lại không đủ những cái chi phí đã bỏ ra. Đặc biệt là gần đây chúng ta thấy những cái giai đoạn vừa rồi ấy, thì ở trên cái rất nhiều những cái platform là phát triển cái hình thức airdrop biến tướng, đặc biệt là ở trên tôn, đúng không ạ? Thì đấy là những cái mà nhà đầu tư cá nhân đang gặp phải. Tức là ngay cái cày airdrop trước đây nó chỉ là cái phần thưởng để trải nghiệm dùng thử sản phẩm, thì bây giờ nó đã biến tướng để móc tiền của nhà đầu tư cá nhân. Thế còn các cái token công nghệ mà niêm yết ở trên các cái sàn lớn, sàn chính thống á, thì tính từ 2022 đến nay, tất cả những dự án công nghệ lớn được đánh giá cao niêm yết ở trên các sàn lớn như là sàn Coinbase, sàn Binance đều đi xuống, đều chia, thậm chí là chia rất nhiều lần. Một cái lý do như thế này, công nghệ bị thổi phồng, người ta thổi phồng quá cái công nghệ và người ta định giá nó quá cao. Khi nick sàn thì cái vốn hóa nó đã lên cả chục tỷ đô, thì lấy đâu mà tăng trưởng về giá cả token nữa. Thì chúng ta là những nhà đầu tư cá nhân, chúng ta mua token chờ tăng giá để lấy lãi, chứ không phải đầu tư vào công nghệ. Cho nên token giảm là chúng ta thua. Thế thì cái lý do này, công nghệ thì bị thổi phồng, xong là định giá thì quá cao, xong là dự án thì phát hành rất nhiều token, nhưng mà khi mà list sàn á, thì cái vốn hóa lưu thông á, rất thấp, nhưng mà vốn hóa tối đa, tức là cái nguồn cung tối đa thì rất cao. Thế và định giá cao, cho nên là khi niêm yết thì giá cao rồi. Thế cái token của những nhà đầu tư sớm người ta lấy ra, người ta cứ xả dần. Và tính ra, tôi tính từ năm 2022 đến nay, hầu như tất cả các dự án được đánh giá về mặt công nghệ cao, list sàn, nhà đầu tư đều thua hết, càng hong càng thua. Trước đây mà chúng ta mua coi công nghệ, chúng ta hong theo thời gian thì sớm hay muộn nó cũng lên. Nhưng mà bây giờ có những con nó chia cả 50-70 lần rồi, không biết đến khi nào mới về bờ. Đấy là cái thực trạng về cái token công nghệ. Thế và trong cái khi mà nhà đầu tư mất phương hướng, không biết là làm cái gì, hong coi công nghệ cũng chết, đi cày airdrop cũng chết, thì cái nhà tạo lập thị trường họ sinh ra cái mimi coin, tức là cái coin mà chỉ truyền cảm hứng thôi, chứ nó không có công nghệ gì đấy cả. Cũng có người được ăn, nhưng không đáng kể. Vì khi mà những cái mimi coin một ngày nó có cả hàng ngàn con nó list sàn, chúng ta không biết con nào là thật, con nào là giả. Bỏ tiền ra mua thì may mắn có con nó tăng, còn lại hầu như bị rung bun và mất tiền. Một số anh chị em thì đánh theo các cái ví của cá mập. Về sau thì các dự án nó làm ấy thì nó mua luôn cái ví cá mập, xong là dự án vừa ra là nó sử dụng cái ví cá mập ấy, nó mua token, các bạn đánh theo nó là nó cũng rung bun cũng chết. Mà các bạn biết là mimi coin đó, để viết token đó, những anh chị em có trình độ công nghệ viết thì trong vòng mấy phút có token niêm yết. Chủ yếu là marketing, làm sao có người vào mua bán nó là họ thắng. Không cần cái gì cả, không cần vét luôn. Đấy là những cái thực trạng cái thị trường tài sản số nó đang diễn ra bây giờ. Tôi đảm bảo nếu anh chị em mà vào thị trường giữa 2021 đến giờ thì 99,99% các anh chị em mất tiền. Chứ bảo là lên mạng thấy họ khoe là ăn được nhiều lắm, ích nọ ích chai đó, là họ có mục đích kéo anh chị em đến một cái mục đích gì đó, chứ còn thực ra là không có đâu. Tôi mà còn thua, trong khi Bitcoin xuống 16.000 tôi hô cộng đồng Việt Nam mua. Tháng 3 tháng 11 năm 2022 tôi hô mua. Đến tháng 3 năm 2023 cũng ở cái sự kiện ba miền Bắc Trung Nam, tôi lúc đó Bitcoin 23.000, tôi đã dám khẳng định Bitcoin sẽ có giá 120 cho đến 180.000 đô. Mà bây giờ là cái target 120 là có rồi. Thế tôi lấy trung bình 120, 180 chia ra khoảng 150.000. Nhưng mà những người hỏi tôi cứ bảo 120.000 là bán được. Mua 20.000, bây giờ 120.000 ít 6 rồi, bán được rồi. Mà tôi còn thua. Thế thì những cái anh chị em mà đấy khoe lãi nhiều ấy, theo tôi nghĩ là họ có mục đích thôi. Đấy là cái hiện trạng cái thị trường crypto hiện nay. Thế thì trong cái bối cảnh đấy thì các nhà đầu tư tổ chức lớn bắt đầu nhảy vào thị trường. Ở trong đó có những cái quỹ đầu tư, người ta quản lý hàng chục tỷ đô la. Thế thì những cái quỹ đấy người ta chỉ thảy vào, như trước đây người ta chỉ thảy vào thị trường tài sản số này khoảng 1-2% cái quỹ quản lý của người ta thôi, thì thị trường nó đã tăng rất nhiều. Nhưng nó lại như này, những cái nhà đầu tư tổ chức vào ấy, thì người ta không đi mua token như nhà đầu tư cá nhân chúng ta nữa, mà người ta là những người nhảy vào thị trường để tạo ra cuộc chơi. Thì trước đây chúng ta biết là các cái nhà đầu tư có các nhà đầu tư tổ chức, nhưng rất ít. Thì các nhà đầu tư tổ chức hồi xưa là lập sàn giao dịch này, làm dự án này, có quỹ đầu tư nhưng mà rất ít. Nhưng mà đến giai đoạn hiện nay, các cái tổ chức họ vào thì họ tạo thêm những cái sản phẩm phái sinh của thị trường crypto, như các cái quỹ ETF, tức là các cái sản phẩm phái sinh người ta niêm yết ở trên thị trường chứng khoán, và người ta quản lý tài sản. Chẳng hạn như là cái Coinbase người ta quản lý tài sản cho các cái nhà đầu tư tổ chức, hoặc là người ta đầu tư vào các cái công ty công nghệ. Tức là cái nhà đầu tư tổ chức vào thị trường hiện nay là người ta không mua token ở trên thị trường giống như nhà đầu tư cá nhân, mà người ta nghĩ ra các sản phẩm mới, tạo ra một cuộc chơi mới. Chính vì lý do đó cho nên là dòng tiền nó bị phân hóa. Hồi xưa, trước đây á, cái quy luật chung của thị trường những cái năm trước á, là Bitcoin sẽ tăng trước. Sau đấy cái dòng tiền từ Bitcoin, khi Bitcoin nó tăng lên cao rồi thì cái dòng tiền từ Bitcoin chảy sang Ethereum. Ethereum tăng sau. Sau đó Ethereum tăng đến một mức độ nào đấy thì cái dòng tiền họ chốt lời Ethereum, họ chuyển qua altcoin. Nhưng mà bây giờ không thế nữa. Cái dòng tiền hiện nay nó chảy vào rất nhiều sản phẩm. Chẳng hạn như các cái nhà đầu tư ở các nước phương Tây, đặc biệt là ở Mỹ, thì nhà đầu tư cá nhân người ta cũng không mua coin trực tiếp. Tức là người ta ít mua coin trực tiếp ở trên sàn, mà người ta chảy vào ETF, chảy vào chứng khoán, cổ phiếu, tức là cổ phần của các công ty công nghệ, hoặc là cổ phần của các công ty có đầu tư crypto. Ví dụ như này, các cái công ty niêm yết, chẳng hạn như là lấy ví dụ như ở Việt Nam như Vinamilk mà có đầu tư vào công nghệ thì cổ phiếu nó tăng trưởng, hay là cổ phiếu của Coinbase, tức là cái mã là mã coin á. Ví dụ thế thì đấy là cái dòng tiền nó bị phân hóa, tức là nó không chảy trực tiếp vào crypto như trước đây nữa, mà nó chảy gián tiếp, tức là vẫn vào thị trường crypto nhưng mà nó là cái dòng tiền gián tiếp. Chính vì cái thị trường á nó biến chuyển như vậy, nó tái cấu trúc lại như vậy, cho nên cái nhà đầu tư cá nhân chúng ta này phải thay đổi để thích nghi với thị trường mới, chứ chúng ta không thể giống như giống như hồi xưa được. Một là chúng ta phải thay đổi cái quan điểm, thay đổi tư duy đầu tư. Hai là chúng ta sẽ bị đào thải. Ở những cái thế hệ già như chúng tôi là khả năng là sắp tới sẽ bị đào thải. Thế hệ mới họ lên thì họ nhanh nhạy hơn, đúng không? Nếu mà ai mà không thay đổi nhanh thì người ấy bị đào thải thôi. Hoặc là mất vốn thì cũng phải đào thải thôi. Đầu tiên là chúng ta định vị lại cái phương diện đầu tư. Ở đây chúng ta có là cái phần rủi ro cao mà lợi nhuận thấp, là cái góc bên này. Cái góc bên này á, là rủi ro cao và rủi ro thấp mà lợi nhuận cao. Thế còn cái góc bên phải á, là rủi ro thấp mà lợi nhuận cao, còn cái góc bên này á, là rủi ro cao và lợi nhuận cao. Nói là rủi ro cao và lợi nhuận cao thì lấy cái ví dụ là Mimi coi, nhưng mà thực ra cá nhân tôi, quan điểm cá nhân tôi nhé, thì những người mới á, tốt hơn hết là đừng có đụng vào những cái đấy. Nó lợi nhuận cao đấy, có thể một ngày nó tăng cả vài chục lần, thậm chí 100 lần. Nhưng mà tiền bỏ vào đấy thì phải xác định chắc là mất đi thì hẵng chơi. Còn nếu mà cái tiền đấy mà mất là không chịu được thì đừng có đụng vào đấy. Thế thì cái góc mà cái nhà đầu tư mới á, là cái góc ở bên phải màn hình á, là những cái ở Việt Nam thì nó chưa có, nhưng sắp tới tôi nghĩ là vài năm nữa sẽ có. Chẳng hạn như là cổ phiếu của các công ty công nghệ. Những công ty công nghệ lớn họ sẽ IPO ở trên sàn thành cổ phiếu, hoặc là các cái chứng chỉ quỹ đầu tư. Nó giống như chứng chỉ quỹ ở bên chứng khoán. Hoặc là rất có thể các cái tổ chức lớn sắp tới họ tham gia, họ sẽ có các cái chỉ số nhóm ngành. Chẳng hạn như là tôi lấy ví dụ một cái công ty chứng khoán rất lớn, người ta có một cái phần vốn đầu tư mạo hiểm, người ta chia ra thành các cái nhóm danh mục đầu tư. Thì các cái chỉ số chẳng hạn như trong đó có nhóm Layer 1, người ta sẽ lựa 10 hay 20 cái dự án tốt ở cái nhóm Layer 1. Thì người ta mới phát hành cái chứng chỉ của cái chỉ số ra thị trường. Thì nhà đầu tư cá nhân thay vì phải đi nghiên cứu thì chúng ta chơi luôn cái chỉ số của các cái công ty như vậy. Đấy là về tương lai. Ngay bây giờ thì chưa có. Còn ngay bây giờ thì chúng ta nên thay đổi cái nền tảng đầu tư. Trước đây á, khi mà mới vào thị trường, đa số chúng ta là thường đa số là đầu tiên là trade theo ngày, tức là trade future, trade margin. Và đến lúc thua lỗ thì bắt đầu chuyển sang phân tích cơ bản để đầu tư dài hạn. Phân tích cơ bản thì trong đó nó có những cái như là công nghệ, rồi bách cơ, rồi đủ thứ. Nhưng mà tóm lại là chúng ta căn cứ vào công nghệ tốt thì sớm muộn nó lên. Đấy là cái tư tưởng trước đây. Hoặc là bách cơ mạnh, chẳng hạn như có Coinbase đầu tư, có Binance đầu tư, có A16Z đầu tư thì sớm muộn nó lên. Thì cái đấy bây giờ không còn đúng nữa. Rất nhiều những cái dự án có các cái quỹ lớn đầu tư đứng sau, nhưng mà giá vẫn chia như thường. Thậm chí là chia cắm mặt không lên được luôn. Thì những cái đấy là chúng ta phải thay đổi. Cái tư duy chúng ta phải thay đổi. Bây giờ không thể dựa vào những cái công nghệ bánh vẽ nữa. Nào là blockchain thế nọ, blockchain thế chia, thế chai, rồi hoàng tử công nghệ. Nhưng mà chia hết. Thế thì bây giờ chúng ta chọn những cái dự án như nào? Chọn những dự án có người dùng. Khi một dự án ra là phải có người sử dụng nó. Ông bảo là layer 1, ông bảo là cơ sở hạ tầng, thì phải có các dự án khác xây dựng cơ sở hạ tầng ở trên nó. thì dự án ấy mới sống sót. Thứ hai là dự án phải tạo ra được doanh thu. Đa số các dự án blockchain ở trên thị trường hiện nay không tự tạo ra được doanh thu, mà tiền ở đâu? Tiền là bán token, nuôi nhân viên. Mà các bạn biết là những dự án blockchain ấy, mà huy động khoảng 10 triệu đô tôi đảm bảo là 6 tháng hết. Lương đép bây giờ nếu mà đép giỏi giỏi 2.000 người ta không làm. Còn trả lương ngàn đó, chỉ mấy ông mới ra trường đó. Huy động khoảng 10 triệu đô mà bảo làm dự án blockchain mấy tháng. Tèo, không còn đâu, không làm được, chết sớm. Cho những cái dự án nào mà phải tạo được doanh thu nuôi quân, còn cái token nó chỉ là cái hỗ trợ để xác minh cho dự án chạy thôi, hoặc là huy động vốn ban đầu thôi, thì dự án ấy sống. Tôi lấy ví dụ này, ví dụ như là Ethereum bây giờ trong 24 giờ nó doanh thu khoảng 1,3 triệu đô. Sống được không? Dự án sống được không? Số lượng người dùng Ethereum bây giờ tất cả hầu như các dự án blockchain về sau này đều cắt cốt của Ethereum đó nào. Thì Ethereum có sống không? Cho nên cái giá nó xuống nó chỉ là tạm thời. Còn một cái dự án nữa không hề hoạt động gì sau khi ra đời đến nay không hề hoạt động gì, đấy là Tron. Thì các bạn thử mở cái đồ thị Tron lên xem. Nó lên rất chậm nhưng mà lên đều từ 2022 đến này. Nó lên đều luôn. Mở ra xem doanh thu của nó trong 24 giờ nó doanh thu 2 triệu đô. Sống không? Quá sống. Thế thì những cái dự án mà tự tạo ra doanh thu được thì đấy là những dự án sống, sẽ sống với thời gian. Còn những dự án mà không tạo ra được doanh thu thì dù ông có vẽ công nghệ bằng trời thì theo thời gian cũng chết, hết tiền là chết. Rất nhiều dự án về công nghệ mơ ước cao xa lắm, nhưng mà huy động được một số triệu đô về làm một vài năm, chia ra làm vài năm không tạo doanh thu là dự án die. Thì đấy là những thứ mà chúng ta cần thay đổi. Không cần công nghệ gì, tức là công nghệ thì vẫn cần, nhưng mà đừng có nghe người ta bơm thổi những cái công nghệ cao siêu làm gì. Xét vào thực tế dự án của ông có tạo ra doanh thu nuôi quân hay không, có người sử dụng những cái công nghệ của ông hay không, thì lúc đấy chúng ta đổ tiền vào. Thì đấy là những cái mà chúng ta nên làm. Còn một cái nữa lúc nãy quên ở đằng trước này, một cái nữa là cái chứng khoán của các công ty công nghệ. Nếu mà chúng ta mở cái đồ thị, cái đồng coin của thằng Coinbase á, thì tính ra từ 2022 đến giờ thì cả cái thị trường tiền số trừ Bitcoin và một vài đồng ra thì tức là cái số lượng rất ít, đa số là đi xuống. Nhưng mà thằng coin của Coinbase tính từ 2022 đến giờ nó đi từ 24 đô và hiện nay nó hơn 300 đô, tức là nó nhân được khoảng hơn 10 lần trong vòng 3 năm. Trong khi thị trường tiền số vẫn đi xuống. Tức là đấy là tôi đang nói cái cổ phiếu công nghệ, tức là cái cổ phiếu của công ty công nghệ. Đấy là những cái mà tư duy chúng ta cần phải thay đổi. Lựa những cái dự án nó tạo ra doanh thu, có người dùng, cần hai cái đấy. Còn nếu mà muốn chuyên sâu á, thì phải nói, nếu mà nói về chọn dự án mà chuyên sâu á, thì phải nói từ sáng đến chiều. Tại để là trong cái khung thời gian ngắn thì mình cũng nói sơ lược vậy thôi. Còn một cái nữa đối với nhà đầu tư cá nhân ấy, đấy chính là cái nguồn vốn. Cái nguồn vốn đầu tư vào thị trường tiền số thì chúng ta phải quan niệm này. Thị trường tài chính là một thị trường cực kỳ rủi ro. Trong đó thị trường tiền số là thị trường rủi ro nhất trong thị trường tài chính. Tức là tất cả mọi thứ đầu tư ở trên đời, thị trường này nó là thị trường rủi ro nhất. Vì nó lợi nhuận cao thì đi đôi với.
And we see that in the screen while I'm waiting here for the section today. It is popular. But the thing is, it's not just a game company. This the Sky Mavis, is create the blockchain ecosystem that support the asset digitalizations, that support the gamer-driven economies, and the interoperability between the games. So this happened. NC Infinity has happened for a few years ago already, but it's still a reminder for us that the innovation might come from outside of traditional finance. Right? So with this case, we see that maybe in the future we will see that some of the innovation that will not just come from financial sectors, but also come from others with the ventures who rethink about the product, reimagine the infrastructure, and dare to take the lead. Right. And but these examples just come up with us for the same common themes here. From the example that I mentioned is that they, from banking to game, to be well prepared to make it the real product, make it a pre-product, right? From piloting to real production, they need the government policy. The government policy, the policy is not about replacing the innovation, but it is about providing a safe and scalable foundation. And to do that, there are 6 big steps that come up to my mind when I think about this one topic. Firstly, putting legal around under digital assets. Right? So whenever the institution, they feel that there is regulation clearly recognize what is their obligation, what is their rights, they will be more confident to practice. Secondly, keep payment conservative while pilots mature. Think about this like a risk containment processes. Third one, use control sandbox. Right? Use control sandbox to learn before scaling up. This sandbox should be designed as the supervised innovation process, right? Not for limiting, but just in order to make sure can integrate with the existing system smoothly. Fourthly, stand out the pilot market structure, right? Be very clearly on who can issue, who can trade, who custody, right? Who will respond, who will hold the keys, who will respond if there is the breach, right? Where the assets will be stored, for example. This needs to be clearer, more well developed. Fifthly, build national rails for identity record, right? Is that compliant and scale, and very importantly, signal that enterprise-grade decentralized ledger technology is welcome. And this should be proof-driven, not hype-driven, because institutions, they need to see the working example, not just promise. So this slide, I just want to sum up what we have discussed, where we have go through from the current stance of Vietnam's situation, right? Some example right now in the banking industry, gaming industry, about the policy. Here and this slide again, this is summary what we just have discussed previously, right? So to unlock the safe and scalable institutional engagement, this would actually take us to go through this 8 steps right here, right? From turn legal recognition into operational, right? Promulgate the crypto assets pilot market with clear guardrails, keep payment conservative, but DeFi stablecoin is very important. Stablecoin on off-ramp land, that's very important, right? Aligning the standard with the global norms, stand up institutional-grade custody auditing standard, build market pipes that with the banking connectivity and clearing infrastructure, leverage national scale identity record rails, and last but not least, provide utility and bank perimeter, right? So when I'm beginning, right, I mentioned about the road of Web3, right? So what we just discussed here is like the guardrails, the road size that help the Vietnam's institution to better prepare, to better navigate where is the turns. Without them, the Web3 road will be very difficult, it's going to be uneven. But with them, this can become a highway that Vietnam institutional might be more confidently to accelerate, right? The question is right now for Vietnam institution is not whether we should take that road or not. We already on it. The question is now how far, how fast, and how boldly we will drive on this road. That is all for my sharing. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Minh Nguyễn, for your valuable insights. Thưa quý vị, và chúng ta sẽ chờ đợi trong vài giây để kết nối với sóng livestream. Thưa quý vị, và ngay sau đây chúng ta sẽ cùng đến với phiên tọa đàm tiếp theo và chúng ta sẽ cùng khám phá bức tranh đang phát triển của những tổ chức tài chính đang ứng dụng tài sản số, từ những ứng dụng như là token hóa, quản lý ngân quỹ cho đến những thách thức pháp lý đang định hình hành vi thị trường. Và phiên thảo luận sẽ quy tụ những chuyên gia hàng đầu tại khu vực, những người sẽ bàn thảo và trao đổi xem là điều gì là thực tiễn, điều gì là cường điệu và đâu sẽ là hướng đi tiếp theo cho những tổ chức khi mà gia nhập vào thế giới tài sản số. Ladies and gentlemen, up next we will dive into the evolving landscape of institutional adoption across Southeast Asia, from tokenization and treasury use cases to the regulatory challenges shaping market behavior. This panel will bring together regional experts to unpack what is real, what is hype, and what's next for institutions navigating digital assets. And right now, it's the panel Institutions and Digital Assets in Southeast Asia. Và chúng tôi xin được trân trọng kính mời lên sân khấu các vị diễn giả cũng như là người điều phối phiên tọa đàm này. And right now, please join me in welcoming on stage our panelists and our moderator. We would like to invite our moderator, Noel, co-founder and CRO of Lydian Labs. And our panelists, Mr. Diederik van Vesch, Regional Director, Asian Chainalysis. We would like to invite Mr. Matthew Newton, Director, Institutional Sales, Galaxy Trading. And Mr. Ben Elbaz, Managing Director, Hashkey Group. Over to you, Noel.
Thank you, my beautiful MC. GM everybody, Xin Chào, and welcome everyone to our panel today, which is the topic of institution and digital assets in Southeast Asia. So I think over the past few years, the conversation around digital assets have shifted from is this real to how do we integrate this with our financial system. And in Southeast Asia, that shift is happening faster than what we think. So on our panel today, it's my pleasure to be on the same stage with three powerhouses that powering this institutional digital asset space. So first of all, we have Diederik from Chainalysis, the blockchain intelligence leader in the space. And we also have Matthew from Galaxy Trading, which is one of the premier institutional trading desks. And then we have Ben from Hashkey, based in Hong Kong, which is one of the Asia's first fully licensed digital assets exchanges. So over to my panelists today to maybe give us a short introduction about yourself and also what the company do and how do we drive the institutional adoption in the space.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Diederik van Wersch. I am the Regional Director for ASEAN at Chainalysis. I've been at Chainalysis and the industry in general for about 7 years right now, which is a lifetime in crypto. And at Chainalysis, we are the blockchain analytics firm. So we're able to analyze the blockchain and figure out who's doing what, and we can identify criminal actors that exist on the blockchain. So we work with private sector, assisting them with AML. We work with public sector, assisting them with their investigations. Very happy to be here today.
Yeah, Matthew from the sell side team of Galaxy, based out of Hong Kong. Galaxy is an investment bank that is tailored for institutions. We're one part data AI center operator. So we run a large site where hyperscalers can run their AI factories in West Texas. And then our crypto business, which is really one part markets, one part asset management. and we really touch all parts of the ecosystem in terms of trading. So we're set up for institutions as a trusted venue to get liquidity, and we cover that across spot, lending, borrowing, and options.
Great, and I think I have to speak on the next keynote after this, so I get the headset. But nice to be here at the panel with the rest of the panelists here. Ben from HashKey. I was the first employee at HashKey, which is now a company of about 500 to 600 people, licenses in over 6 countries across four different continents. So it's been really exciting for us as a company to have built something that from day one was regulated and compliant under the assumption that the market would be going towards regulatory compliance long term. So it was not easy being kind of the lone company that was trying that in 2018. But I think recently we've seen with a lot of the regulatory clarity across the world that it's paying dividends for us.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the short and sweet introductions. So I think maybe the words of institutional involvement is not something very unique for us, but maybe we can start with a short introduction. What does it mean by institutional involvement for the benefit of everyone here?
That is a very good question. When I think of institutional involvement, what I'm thinking of is crypto going away from being a niche esoteric asset class, as it has been through, let's say, the first decades of its history, to fully entering into the mainstream. That's seeing major financial institutions, whether they be payment processors, central banks, truly trying to adopt and embrace the cryptocurrency industry. And rather than see themselves as adversarial to cryptocurrency, rather see crypto as something that's going to try and harm them, see it as something they can integrate into their own systems. That, to me, is what true institutional adoption means. And when we're looking now and seeing major financial institutions, whether it be MasterCard, whether it be DBS Bank, whether it be Standard Chartered, adopt cryptocurrency, offer custody services, offer exchange services, offer stablecoin services, we're seeing major governments, the United States most saliently, really adopting cryptocurrency or taking a friendly stance towards blockchain. That, to me, is a real sign that institutional adoption is on its way.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much on point. I think from our perspective, we're talking about large financial institutions actually believing in the asset class, whether it's Bitcoin or using stablecoins or integrating blockchain into their operations. I think, we saw the other day that Harvard now announced that they have a large Bitcoin holding. I think signs like that, large, slow capital, patient capital, investing in the space and believing in the use case and the future of the technology. I think for us, that's what institutional adoption is.
Yeah, and I think the presentation that was just before this was spot on, which is once you have regulatory clarity and then once you have licensed companies, it really unlocks a lot of real institutional adoption and use cases. I mean, where we're headquartered in Hong Kong, I mean, we see it on a daily basis. It's been quite interesting, right? Like in 2018, 2019, when Hong Kong first had the digital asset regulatory framework there were not, you didn't have the same level of it. Obviously, you didn't have the same level of adoption then as you do now, right? So what has happened over time is as you have the regulatory framework and then as you have licensed companies like HashKey on the asset management side or also on the exchange side have like a trusted venue for institutions to come into the market, it really unlocks a lot of interesting things. I think one example that isn't discussed that often, I think globally, is how forward the Hong Kong market is with regards to securities brokers offering and virtual banks also offering crypto asset trading to their end customers, right? So the brokers, right, security brokers are also one type of institution, right? The majority of time we talk a lot about the institutions like MicroStrategy as a treasury company or BlackRock, more on the asset management side, but there's been a huge amount of crypto asset trading in the internet broker apps in Hong Kong, and they're only able to do that by linking up to like the licensed platforms. So it's quite exciting to see different forms of institutional adoption happen because of the underlying regulatory layer.
Thank you. And in your perspective, what exactly is the stage right now for institutional adoption in Southeast Asia markets? And is there any significant difference for different cycles for the past. And can you give us some perspective on that?
Yeah, where are we right now in institutional adoption? It's interesting. I was just chatting to one of my colleagues here. When I joined crypto 7 years ago, when I told people I work in the crypto space, I got funny looks. Like there was a sense that isn't that crypto thing just used to scam people and buy drugs? But now there's a lot more sense of, oh, there are actual real legitimate use cases for cryptocurrency. It's not the asset class that's viewed with the same level of skepticism that it was in the past. As to where we are, I mean, I wouldn't be able to give the stage a specific name, but we are definitely at a point where there's an acceptance from mainstream institutions that cryptocurrency is here to stay. They are better off trying to adopt and work with it rather than fight against it. I know as well at Chainalysis, we work extensively with public sector as well. I know it's a private sector focused panel, but to just give you that angle, there was a sense in the past that from public sector, whether it be regulators, law enforcement, that this crypto thing, they were just kind of hoping it would go away, they could ignore it, and eventually it would be out of sight and out of mind. Now there's a growing acceptance that, hey, crypto's here to stay. Our citizenry, they are adopting it, they are using it, whether we want them to or not. We need to know more about that. One thing I think I see a lot in Asia in terms of adoption versus the rest of the world, you know, we at Chainalysis every single year, we have a report where we look at grassroots level adoption across the world. And what I find fascinating in Asia is the way that there's adoption at all levels of the society. So we see grassroots level adoption. That could be things like DeFi games. Axie Infinity was obviously huge here. It was huge in the Philippines as well. We're seeing use cases for people using crypto as a hedge against inflation. We're getting people using cryptocurrencies to conduct remittances. But then at the upper level, we're also seeing major institutions adopt crypto. I already mentioned DBS Bank in Singapore. We're seeing Standard Chartered adopt it. We're seeing stablecoin issuers becoming increasingly prominent in places like Hong Kong. So what I find fascinating about crypto adoption in ASEAN, in Southeast Asia, perhaps more than any other place in the world I can think of, is that it's an adoption that seems to be encompassing all aspects of the society rather than just at the top level of that institutional adoption, which is what we see in some other regions.
Yeah, for me in the lead up to this, I've been at Galaxy for nearly 7 years, and I remember in the early days when Facebook tried to launch Libra, and with Steve Kelso hired me at Galaxy. We were watching the video in small London office, and the one thing he said to me afterwards, "What did you notice in that video?" And it was emerging markets. So there was a video by a promotional video, and it was all about emerging markets. And nearly 7 years on, I think what we've seen is the explosion of stable coins, and I think this part of the world has benefited greatly from that. Whether it's reducing costs, avoiding the banking system, or just being able to find security in a more stable asset. I think that for me probably is where we've really seen adoption. So the institutions I think who've really bought into it here are obviously the payments companies and trying to increase it. And then maybe some of the wealth management companies. If I think of trips to Singapore, there's probably some of the wealth management platforms are trying to integrate structured products, or trying to appeal to the folks that have benefited from crypto appreciation in their portfolios. And then lastly, what's different in this cycle? Well, I think we're talking about a strategic reserve in the US and regulatory clarity. I mean, that's been the game changer, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting things happening in Southeast Asia. I think there's a few examples I can give. I mean, I think the general use cases around RWA tokenization and payments, and I think it's really exciting to see. I mean, I think similar to the other panelists here, right? When you're in the industry for 7 to 8 years, like in year one, there's a lot of promise, right? It's like, oh, the technology can do this, and I remember back in those days, it was always around, there's so much pain points in cross-border payments, right? That has been like one of the big pain point problem statements that blockchain is supposed to address from day one, right? But we haven't really gotten there yet, but it seems like we're on the cusp of it. And in Southeast Asia, I mean, this is now public. Hashkey has a collaboration. So it's interesting. So Hashkey has this licensed exchange in Hong Kong, and then across Southeast Asia, what we see obviously is you have a lot of local licensed exchanges, right? And each of the local licensed exchanges in different countries, they are the ones that obviously have the most stable like fiat on and off ramp. So recently we've done a partnership with Coins PH in the Philippines, where we see, for the remittance corridor, we see demand for consumers having accounts on both exchanges in order to be able to do on ramp in one jurisdiction and off ramp in another jurisdiction, right? So I think for certain use cases in Southeast Asia, I mean the no-brainer is definitely around remittances, but I think the question is like, how do you actually implement that, and where are people actually going to on and off ramp? And I think traditionally historically, some of the normally used like fiat on and off ramp channels have been through the third-party payment processors who can do kind of the local currency payouts. But I think as you start to see more and more like local licensed exchanges, you get more opportunity for consumers to have what I would call like native off ramp rather than have to go through third parties. So I think these remittance corridors for stablecoins are going to be incredibly important. And then we've also seen a lot of experimentation around RWA tokenization in some of the international financial centers of Southeast Asia. Hong Kong is one example, right? Right now in HashKey's exchange app in Hong Kong, you can actually directly subscribe to a tokenized money market ETF from within the crypto exchange app, which is quite interesting, right? And I think you're going to start to see more and more of these types of tokenized financial product integrations with the licensed crypto platforms.
Thank you. And I think interesting that stablecoins are being mentioned as of you. The fast growing topic which is recently everyone is talking about. Ben, you recently shared with CNBC that stablecoins could replace SHIFT for cross-border transactions. Is this a wild dream, or is there a need for more regionalized adoptions? So as Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand are already talking about seamless trade, is there still a need for stablecoins in your perspective?
Yeah, it's interesting you pulled out that quote, right? That was a kind of a bold claim. I mean, I think if you look at like digital, again, I think no one on the stage is really a digital like payments expert, right? But when you're in blockchain, you kind of see how money flows and you see how things work, right? I think for SWIFT specifically, it's obviously US dollar rail transfers, and the majority of stablecoin rails are obviously all US dollar. So I think it's only natural that over time, you look at, there was a really good report, I think, in March or April this year from Artemis, who did a really detailed report on like the state of B2B stablecoin payments. So there's a huge like uptrend in the usage of stablecoins for B2B payments, and it makes sense, right, for real-time settlement, and then also for less costs and things like this. And I think where we've seen some interesting demand is sometimes in terms of the import-export businesses, you have buyers from certain countries, right, emerging markets, who might be buying from sellers in another emerging market, right? And if the sale of that good is in US dollar, the actual transfer from the buyer to the seller is actually quite complicated, right? So obviously we've seen a huge amount of traffic and transfers in USDT, for example, to facilitate that type of flow, right? So as if you look at the numbers, right, and you assume that stablecoin market cap is going to continue to increase and increase and increase, then it's only natural that you might have some competition between the kind of the traditional payment rails and the traditional cross-border payment rails and some of the newer stablecoin side. So I think it's pretty exciting space to watch.
Thank you, Ben. And I think institutions face a dynamic regulatory landscape across Southeast Asia. So some markets like Singapore are relatively clear but have started tightening. And others like Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, and Indonesia are still figuring out. So in Diedrich's perspective, how are institutions navigating this lack of consistency across the region? And how are they finding ways to move forward despite regulatory uncertainty in the space?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very valid question. I will say that I moved from the EMEA region, the European region, to APAC, and I still say that I feel there's a much more broad, wide, dynamic crypto sector here, in large due to the clarity of the regulations and the dynamic nature of the crypto space that exists in Asia relative to other parts of the world. I think what most institutions are now trying to do is they're simply trying to identify the key use cases that are going to be valid in the coming years, trying to try and develop as much as possible, identify the key regions where they can operate with. One thing we find here in APAC is that this is one of the most dominant regions when it comes to cryptocurrency adoption, and I don't necessarily see that changing anytime soon.
How about Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, I just think depending on the institution, obviously, if payments companies probably see the opportunity a little clearer than maybe some of the investing institutions. But ultimately, regulatory clarity, security, we talk about it all the time, but they're important, right? I mentioned Harvard earlier. Those endowments, we've been having those conversations for as long as I've been at Galaxy. That's why we set up the asset management business. But ultimately, the ETF and regulatory clarity from the administration, has seen these guys actually pull the trigger and make investments in crypto. So, yeah, I think just depending on the institution, if you're more sensitive to regulatory clarity, it's just going to withhold them doing anything in the space.
Thank you, Matthew. So I think each of you working with institution in a different way. So whether it's from infrastructures or trading or from the compliance standpoint, from your perspective, what do you think is still missing in Southeast Asia to truly unlock the next phase of institutional adoption, especially when compared to more developed markets like US or Hong Kong framework? Maybe Ben first.
No, it's good. It's a good question. What are still some of the gaps? I think there, from our perspective as a company that operates like a licensed exchange, I think there's been a lot that I think Hong Kong has done to ensure that like local users in that city are only able to use like the licensed exchanges and are not subject to the risk of using the offshore exchanges. So I think one thing to maybe one potential gap in Southeast Asia that I think might be addressed over time is just maybe regulators and governments focusing a little bit more on ensuring that the users like local to each country are not able to use kind of the more risky like offshore exchanges, because I think there's been a lot of examples of that. I mean, in Hong Kong specifically, there was a few cases where people were subject to fraud using some of these exchanges. So anyway, I think in terms of the gaps, I think maybe some enforcement around like the governments and regulators, so that kind of the local ecosystems in each country are a little bit more kind of robust.
Thank you. And Dietrich, what kind of regulation framework is more favorable for institutional perspective?
I mean, in terms of what's more favorable, when I speak to different financial institutions, what I find they look more than necessarily than just favorability is just stability. They want to know that, hey, in 5 years, can I trust that the regulation is still going to be friendly? Is this a place that I can set up shop? So I think what they want is to have a bit of a more mid to long-term view. I think they welcome regulation. Most institutions I speak, they just want to know a little bit more what those regulations are going to be. And I think what we do at Chainalysis a lot is that we do a lot of work and education with the regulators. And one thing we try and educate them on is the fact that the blockchain is actually an incredibly powerful tool to fight money laundering. There's actually nowhere where criminals are less safe than on the blockchain, because every transaction is public. Every transaction is visible for the world to see. Right now, we're working with stablecoin issuers, and when they launch a token, we have solutions that can tell them everything that's going on with their token in the wild, who's interacting with their token, which criminal actors are interacting with it. Now, that's an incredibly powerful aspect of blockchain technology. And to bring it back to your question, the regulations that are the most favorable are the ones that are going to embrace that aspect of blockchain, to use the inherent open nature of the blockchain, the inherent danger that exists to criminals in the blockchain because all their transactions are public, and build regulations around that. And that's one thing we're trying to tell regulators when we speak to them and institutions, that, look, you don't need to be scared of crypto. Far from it. If you want to catch criminals, if you want an asset class where criminals can operate with very little obfuscation, then crypto is the asset class you should be choosing. So regulators need to build regulation that embraces the open nature of the blockchain and actually can help mitigate the criminal aspect that might exist in this space.
Matthew, what do you think? What is the gap that Southeast Asia currently have?
I think probably just harmonious regulation and agreement among the regulators so that they can all operate together. I think, every regulator is probably worried with the emergence of stablecoins and it being dollar denominated, that maybe, their currency is under threat. So I think, closing the ecosystem, maybe creating more of a trading environment or an access environment within their own country and stopping it going offshore.
Thank you so much. And I think looking ahead, what do you think the future of digital assets in Southeast Asia will look like in the next 5 years? And what is the most exciting way you see your platform contributing to that future or to that journey?
Yeah, so I think what's really exciting in Asia, I mentioned this already, that we release a report every single year that looks at adoption across different countries, right? Now, Asia features prominently in that list, but it's not exactly the countries that you would expect. Indonesia, number 3 in terms of global adoption. Vietnam, number 5 in terms of global adoption. You have Cambodia on that list. You have Thailand on that list. I mean, countries like Cambodia, that's not the country I would think of necessarily when it comes to cryptocurrency adoption. Now, one of the dreams of Satoshi when he launched the Bitcoin white paper was this concept of banking the unbanked. To give people that came from the developing world that may not have had access to the financial institutions you'd find in the first world, to give them access to the financial space. And in part, we're seeing that dream realized because developing nations are adopting crypto more and more. They're adopting it from use cases, as I mentioned, related from gaming to a hedge against inflation, to remittance payments, to a way to escape from the volatility that might exist in their own currencies. And when you ask about the future of it, I think what I'm really excited to see is, yes, I expect to see countries like Singapore and Hong Kong and to an extent China still dominate in terms of adoption. But what I'm really excited to see is how this is going to impact the developing markets that we're seeing, places like Vietnam, places like Indonesia, how they are going to grow in prominence, how they are going to continue to adopt this cryptocurrency. And I think we could see in Asia, because there's such a variety of different markets, we could see it becoming the foremost region in the world, led by the more developed, let's say, institutional-backed countries like Singapore or Hong Kong, all the way down to the countries where we see more grassroots level adoption for those different use cases I just mentioned. So it's a very exciting time to be in Asia in crypto.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we'd love to see some more of the larger institutions, the pensions, the asset managers based throughout Asia start to embrace the ecosystem a little bit more and make larger investments into things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, really believe in the ecosystems, in addition to, say, stuff happening at the grassroots level. And I guess that's really it. That's where we're ultimately set up to provide a service. So we'd love to see people in Vietnam or Thailand really start to embrace the investment side of this.
I still think we're quite early in seeing what this industry can do, right? I think even if you look at RWA tokenization, right, and stablecoins, this was something maybe like 4 years ago, right? People were like, oh, tokenization, you can do all these things, and then 3 or 4 years later, it starts to actually come to fruition. Stablecoins are one I argue is one type of RWA, right? But if you think back, I still think there's like so much more in DeFi and like decentralized businesses and like the Web3 businesses that really haven't accelerated into mass adoption yet. And I think one of my opinion on that is I think one of the barriers to date has just been like kind of the lack of really reliable fiat on and off ramps where companies that are, let's say, funding in tokens, or they're trying to manage their treasury of tokens, like having them be able to have confidence in a reliable way to go back into the fiat system. And then also similarly for like retail users, right? Making sure that there's easy ways to go back and forth between like Web3 and fiat world, right? So I think there's over 5 years, I think there's going to be a lot of excitement. I still think there's a lot of excitement to be seen around DeFi. And also if you look at like kind of like the last what's interesting in crypto is like each bull cycle, right? It's like there's people get so excited by the promise of the technology and all these different use cases, but sometimes it's too early, right? So if you look back to like 2021, I mean, just like 2 cycles, right? You look back to 2021, kind of like, DeFi plus NFTs. Now you're kind of starting to really see really cool high performance DEXs. And I still think we haven't really reached the pinnacle of what you could see around like business models that have like NFTs integrated in interesting ways. I still think we're quite early on that. I think also there's something, if you look back to like 2017, 2018, right? And that was like, kind of the ICO boom, right? There's all this like promise and excitement around, there's these like decentralized businesses, decentralized infrastructures and all these different things. So I think a lot of those businesses haven't really like scaled up and really reached mass adoption yet. But I think within, as you start to have the payments layer, right? As you start to have like the stablecoin payments layer become institutionalized, I think it helps reduce some of the barriers to those businesses in the future. So I think there's still a lot of excitement around some of the decentralized businesses and Web3 apps.
Thank you for the answers. And I think maybe some of you don't know what Southeast Asia has achieved this far. So maybe some of the statistics or some facts for everyone to understand. So I think Singapore is leading this like institutional adoption in Southeast Asia with licensing and groundbreaking pilots like Project Guardian. And then Thailand is tokenizing real estate and infrastructures. Indonesia has launched a national crypto house, crypto house, and in Philippines, major banks are already offering custody and blockchain-based payments. And in Malaysia, regulators are laying the groundwork for tokenization and Web3 innovation under Malaysia Madani program. But I think there are still things that are lacking in these countries. And I would love to hear from the panelists your perspective on what are the interesting examples or any framework or any specific innovations that this Southeast Asia country can actually adopt from other countries. Is there anything in specific that you guys can bring up as an example for case studies?
Well, I think maybe I'll start. I'll give you guys some time to think.
She stumped us.
Yeah. No, I think some interesting. I think some interesting frameworks that can be points of reference in Southeast Asia. Again, I go back to Hong Kong a little bit because it's just where we're headquartered and where I've seen a lot of things. Is I think you have a regulatory framework that comes out, but then the government in Hong Kong comes out, I think like 2022 or something like that, saying that they wanted to really establish like a Web3 hub. And I think for any country, right, if it really wants to develop a hub for Web3 or a hub for blockchain, it's really important that the government's not out there like building all the applications, right? But it is important for builders to see that at least at the the national level, the government level, that there's support for a particular industry, right? So I think what we've seen here in Vietnam over the past few months, at least this year, is quite exciting, right? In terms of things like adding blockchain to like the national strategic technologies, and I think that's definitely the right approach. But I think for any country that's really interested in kind of building itself as a hub of Web3, either from like developers or institutional adoption, it is really important that the government kind of come out and say, hey, we want to do this. We are supportive of this industry. No worries. So I think that's something that has worked in Hong Kong, because we've seen a lot, like because it's important. We don't operate in a vacuum, right? So like the large corporates, the banks, they pay attention to what the government is saying, right? So if you want to get larger corporates on board, if you want to get banks on board, it's important to hear at the highest levels that there's support. That doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be the corporates who are like building each app that's successful, but the corporates might be through their venture arm funding like a smaller startup that's working on it, right? And that capital might be locked. That capital might be unlocked by that corporate just hearing that the government is in support of a particular industry, right? So I think those are some things that I think have worked and could be transferable to other countries in Southeast Asia.
I would say in addition to that, though, it's important that your institutions and your infrastructure are also aligned with the government direction, because so it was around 22 that Hong Kong started to come out in favor of crypto. but the banks, the infrastructure in Hong Kong was not welcoming to the crypto companies coming and set up. So, for instance, I can tell you that Galaxy had a very hard time getting a bank account in Hong Kong, and ultimately it was a large bank in Singapore that banked us because their Hong Kong branch we were having no progress with. So I think it's important that the infrastructure on the ground is aligned, and that it's not just the government also coming out and saying, yeah, we want to bring everybody here, but if you can't move if you can't set up on the ground, whether that's getting a bank account or something similar, then that creates barriers to setting up in the country too.
Yeah, we saw an interesting initiative in Singapore a couple of years back called Project Guardian, where the MAS, the local regulator, actually worked with financial institutions to discuss how they could better integrate cryptocurrency across the industry in Singapore. And what I really like about this initiative is we have this constant sense that the regulator and then the market should be at odds of each other. But here we saw a synergy between the two where, yes, we do need a regulator to set the playing rules, but the regulator should also be aware of what's going on in the game. So what I liked about this approach was that in Singapore, you saw that the private sector, the market, the companies were in the same room as the regulator, helping to best figure out how they can approach this issue of cryptocurrency regulation across the country. And I think that's one thing that I think other regulators could learn from, is that work with your market, understand more about the technology, understand more about the industry. Now, we at Chainalysis often sit as a bit of an intermediary there, where we're also explaining to the regulators, hey, this is actually how cryptocurrency works. This is, from a compliance and investigatory solution, what's available in the market. This is how you should be thinking about regulation. And we're even seeing now cases of regulators that are hiring people, blockchain experts, who are coming from the actual cryptocurrency industry to make sure that they have in-house experts and fully understand what it is that they're regulating. So I think that's a model that other countries in this region can emulate.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for the insightful discussion today. So I think that's almost the end of our panel today, and I would love to also give myself introductions. So it's Noel here, the co-founder of Lydian Labs and also the organizer of Malaysia Blockchain Week. So I think kudos for all the organizers across Southeast Asia, not only on hosting conference itself, but I think leading on a lot of industry conversation between regulators with the industry players, like what Diedrich mentioned earlier, where regulators should listen to the market players to understand better about the market, and looking forward for the next 5 years on what can be unfold in the Southeast Asia. Thank you everyone for having us today and be here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Noel, for leading an insightful panel discussion. Thank you to all the panelists for your contributions. We would like to invite you all to please remain for a photo. Thưa quý vị, và ngay sau đây thì sóng livestream của chúng ta sẽ được kết nối trực tiếp với khán phòng bên cạnh ạ. Once again, thank you.
Gradually, when the market started growing, we see other people thinking from the other angle, which is more from the decentralization part. When you think about how DEXs operate, which the speed or the latency or the cost for every change of state is what users want, right? So ultimately, for every user, you are building something that users like to use or actually want to use. So if there are frictions that's caused by decentralization, do you stick to decentralization because you want the purity of your architecture, or you try to figure out something that is, on one hand, not sacrificing the decentralization, but also cater to users' needs? So that's the other way that people started thinking about actually what we should decentralize and what we should use centralized services. So for us, under this thought process, we decided to put our order book, our risk engine, matching engine off-chain, and everything else, including settlement, validation, and records on-chain. So that's giving users enough speed for
a better user experience, but also preserve the nature of decentralization finance, which is permissionless, which is self-custody and things like that. So there are two ways of how you really look at CDFI, and there are protocols on the market right now prove both has real use cases. So I think it's really depends on the use cases and what are the users actually looking for.
I kind of echo what Constance mentioned when we talk about big institutions like VCs, hedge funds. They do go through centralized providers to really get the benefit of DeFi. So on our side, we have been seeing a lot of that as well. Basically, it's kind of like a segregation of role, right? The VCs can just spend their time, really advising their projects, hunting for more new gems, while we can take care of like all the things trading, both in and out of DeFi. So back to the question, right? CDFI, I have a slightly different definition because most people look at it from a product point of view. From my point of view, it's more liquidity oriented, so and more opportunity oriented. So my definition is always gonna be like CDFI is two pools of liquidity, and the DeFi part is growing, right? So it's really just platforms for us to extract the best prices, get more certainty of like settlement and stuff like that.
Yeah, maybe I'll just start from how CDFI concerns to Belize Labs itself, and then I'll add some more opinions about CDFI itself. So we are fully decentralized protocol, and we have taken quite a long time to kind of go through the whole flow of the platform to make sure that everything is well decentralized, secure, and every party's rights are well protected within the context of the smart contract. So, however, we are a platform where other projects are going to launch their apps, and we are non-opinionated. So we are going to support both CFI and DeFi applications that are intending to launch on it. Yeah, so my opinion about CDFI from the users, some of our panel members mentioned about the user experience becoming much simpler and easier thanks to it, and I'm very supportive of this idea. Of course, as long as it is done under good regulated environment, where the users' kind of interests are not being compromised by any means, and the users' rights are protected. Adding more tools to make things simpler in terms of UX, I'm quite supportive of that. And I think another big direction of CDFI that we are already seeing that's coming up is bringing of assets that are not natively built on chain, right? Real world assets. Stable coins, real world kind of different category of assets like real estate, et cetera, bringing them on chain, giving people who are using different on-chain apps exposure to the APIs and yields from generating from these platforms. I think this is going to be a great use case to kind of merge the traditional finance and decentralized finance. And again, but I have to go back and mention that I think this has to be done in a well-regulated kind of environment to make sure that the user rights are well protected. And I think it seems like the US is going to lead this wave of innovation.
Yeah, we had a conversation just preparing for this panel, and I think that's a really good point. There's, I guess, to elaborate on what we've just discussed, there is always a degree of counterparty risk associated with any asset that you hold in crypto, right? Obviously, some are more secure than others, and self-custody brings you closer to having, your own interests like protected. But obviously, if it's the case of real-world assets or stable coins, then you are trusting a party with, backing those assets, and in terms of like my experiences in DeFi, DeFi is actually still pretty new, all things considered, right? It wasn't that long ago we had AMMs, which allowed for on-chain trading, and things like we take it for granted these days, but it's not even that long ago where everything had to be done on a centralized exchange or peer-to-peer model, and so I think the practical argument is always being, well, users need certain functions today, right? You know, whether it's, well, I think trading has largely been solved, you know, with AMMs, and now there's interoperable, methods to do cross-chain swaps, even or within single-chain ecosystems. But do you think this sort of history, the core argument of like, okay, it's for user onboarding, right? So given that there's always improvements happening in DeFi, whether it's, like I said, interoperability of cross-chain liquidity or accounts, gas abstraction, or like layer 2, layer 3 ways of like scalability, do you think like, what kind of unique values do you think CDFI provides that can't be achieved, on a long enough time frame, where through the continuous improvement of decentralized, solutions?
Got it. Okay, so again, my answer is quite similar on that particular side as well. So let's take an example of 2020 when I started crypto. So at that time, DEX's V2 was famous, like specifically for Uniswap. That time, we didn't think about stable coins backing some yield, because in US, it's not possible to get the yields, or maybe you get APY on your saving account. So that is one of the major unique value proposition which we saw in this cycle, that people can hold a stable coin and they can earn yield out of it. Now, how this yield is coming from, it's very specific, like either they invest in the bonds, they pass on the yield to you. If they invest in some stocks, strategies, arbitrage opportunities and stuff. So initially in TradFi, if we talk about Goldman Sachs and stuff, so they used to do all these TradeFi products where they used to analyze the strategies of money market instrument, like how much yield they are providing, how much we can give it back to the users. Similarly, it was around initially at 4 to 5%, which was quite low as compared to DeFi. So in last cycle, I still remember like I've seen 1000% APY as well on some protocols. So it was very like weird for a Web3 person to go to Web2, like Web2, these instruments and get just 4 or 5% yield. So that was the reason, like initially the ETFs and all these things came into picture, and people thought the mass adoption can come through this way, where CDFI can just be the front end, but the base infrastructure will still be the decentralized one. So let's talk about RWA. So what we are doing is fractionalizing the assets, which was done previously as well. So I'm sure like a lot of people know about REITs. So REITs were the one where you fractionalize the property, you issue a ETF on the stock market. But it is done when, when it comes to a blockchain, so it is known as a RWA project. So it is not a new thing. It's just that the infrastructure or the baseline is changed, and it is made as a tokenized, which has more liquidity and people can trade it simply. So you don't have to wait for it. That is also one of the reasons, like we have seen a lot of VCs in Web3 because it's easy to dump the token. You don't have to take permissions of anyone. So, but yeah, so coming back to like what things unique we have seen, like first on-chain stocks. It's so cool that you can use your BTC, you can use a meme coin to buy a stock like Tesla. So maybe I'm using Bonk to buy a Tesla stock. So that is a cool feature, which brings the new liquidity into the market. Second, I'm really bullish on all these stable coins which we have seen right now. So it includes like projects like Ethena, Ondo, and other people. Third, RWA is still new. I don't think like it has the mass adoption. People say a lot of pipelines, they have like 450 million, 550 million, but I still don't trust them, similar to we have seen Mantra. So it's like people think that RWA still has the adoption, but I don't think so. But yeah, apart from that, stablecoin with yield-bearing assets, all the CDFI products, which has a better UI UX, where you can use your payment system as Apple Pay. So recently, Binance introduced Velo. So Velo is a quite good product, which we have seen to like integrate to any product which we have right now. But in general, I still believe that we are still on the early stage. We don't have the ETFs right now. So ETFs are on stock market, but if we want to create a club of ETFs like stocks or maybe tokens on chain, so we don't have that right now. So there are a lot of things which we need to improve, and I think so it's like 1% of it which we have already done on the CDFI side.
Sorry, this question is just given that there will be continuous developments in DeFi, to improve UX, right? Get around like the barriers. What unique, values do you think like the CeFi part of CDFi is necessary, in the long term?
I sort of think when I hear about this question, I think about what users actually coming to DeFi via CDFi, right? I think in the early stage of DeFi, when there's AMM, when there's yield, lots of people were okay with this decentralization feature, and lots of people actually love the function without KYC and free and easy of creating wallets. But when the DeFi use case keep expanding, there's more people that actually need someone else or like an intermediary to power the execution for them. So I think that's how CDFi came into this the concept in the beginning, right? And I think for CDFi to really grow to the next stage, in terms of how expanding the entire DeFi use case, I think there's multiple layers that when I think about this question. Firstly, is definitely who are the precise target customers that this CDFi or DeFi in general is trying to go for, right? And with the ETFs and with the US regulation coming to more and more clear, and also potential regulations that come into DeFi, I think the DeFi space in general are getting prepared for talking to regulators. And that's probably part of the major issue or like major challenge that CDFi as a whole, or I think DeFi in general, has to prepare themselves for, whether they are operating AMM or they are operating a layer 1 chain, or like us, we're operating a DEX, even though it's not KYC, but do you understand KYT, or do you have necessary safeguard of custodians, or are you ready to onboard fiat on and off-ramp partners? I think that's a lot of the thought process behind. And I think in this cycle, because of the rise of meme coin, it makes people understand DeFi a lot easier. So that's why when we saw the launch of Trump tokens, lots of people come onto Moonshot and use their credit cards to buy meme coins. And I think that's one way that we are introducing mass adoption and also fiat currencies into the DeFi world. But that part still remains unclear in terms of regulation framework and also lots of necessary KYC transactions. But that indeed widens the pie and liquidity of DeFi in general. So I think there are a lot of different gray areas that will become clearer and clearer moving forwards. And I do think that regulations and necessary framework in place would help DeFi in general grow bigger and bigger.
I think in my world, the short answer to this is better optionality, because then with a good CDFi bridge, you will be able to access your funds to CFi and then bring it back to DeFi when you need it. So I think in my world, the two main important things are execution speed and settlement speed. And I think I can draw like two examples of failures and successes of both like CFi and DeFi to illustrate this a little bit more. So if you guys remember, Trump coin was launched on a random Saturday. Like out of nowhere, someone just decided, or the team just decided to launch Trump meme token on Solana. It started on Jupiter. Everyone was going crazy about it. Solana was congested, and like I think people are finding it very difficult to get the next transaction on chain. Shortly after, then you have your likes of Binance and some other centralized exchanges listed. And these are the guys that can handle the real load, right, in today's environment. So they can handle like 1 million TPS, no issues. But then when you go to Solana, it gets a little bit congested. So without a proper access to both, it will be a lot more difficult to accumulate and decumulate quickly. So that is one example where I think you probably want to have access to both CFi and DeFi, even though I think most of the audiences here are leaning towards more to the DeFi spectrum. Now, another example which DeFi clearly won was during the Palm Fund auction mechanism, right? They have allocations on chain, which is a huge part. And then they also have allocations given to a few CEXs like KuCoin, Gate, and Kraken, and I think another 2 more. And then you can see Solana handled that really well. All the allocations went very smoothly. It was pretty much a very fair way of race. But then that was also a point where I think the CEXs had some hiccups. And then without a proper CDeFi access, or rather a bridge to really move funds quickly and effectively, it will be quite hard to get your hands on the allocations. So I think what's needed for CDeFi is really the speed of moving things from one place to another, and then so that when the crunch time is there, when we really need the liquidity, we are able to access your
Ngay sau đây sẽ mang chủ đề là tái định nghĩa tiền tệ, stablecoin và tương lai hệ thống tài chính. Và ở đó chúng ta sẽ cùng nhau tìm hiểu ứng dụng thực tiễn, cơ hội mở rộng và ảnh hưởng của stablecoin đối với nền kinh tế toàn cầu. Ladies and gentlemen, the upcoming session will be a fireside chat where we will dive deeper into the most impactful innovations in digital finance, stablecoins, and in this fireside chat titled Money Reimagined, Stablecoins and the Future of Financial Systems, will uncover how stablecoins are transforming the way we transact, build trust, and connect economies around the borders. Và ngay sau đây chúng ta hãy cùng chào đón lên sân khấu ông Richmond, đồng sáng lập Dark Lab and Paxos, Mr. Richmond, co-founder of Zack Lab and Paxos. Và cùng với người điều phối của chúng ta đó chính là Gian, trưởng bộ phận hệ sinh thái và đối tác tại WSPN. The fireside chat will be moderated by Jan, Head of Ecosystem and Partnerships at WSPN.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Vietnam. My name is Jan, and I represent the head of Ecosystem and Strategic Partnerships at WSPN. We are the issuer of WUSD, which is now a native stablecoin on Viction chain. Right. So with my background actually in banking and payments technology, my work actually includes bridging stablecoins to the world of use cases in a traditional banking system, financial system, and in future also the Web3 ecosystem. So very honored to have with me today Richmond Teo. Mr. Richmond Teo is actually the founder and co-founder of Zack Labs, an AI-enabled blockchain infrastructure. And he was also the co-founder of Paxos. So he's actually one of the industry veterans that we all know, very familiar with. And he has launched many of the most regulated and also most adopted stablecoins around the world. So Rich himself, he has a great wealth of experience within the blockchain and Web3 ecosystem. And he will be today sharing with us his journey as well as his newest developments. So the AI technology essentially will help to make transactions even smarter than before. And we'll be looking forward to the chat then. So today we'll be talking about the money reimagined, stablecoins, and the future of financial systems. So within this ecosystem and this space, we look forward to transforming how money is being thought of and also transforming the way value is being transferred around the system. Okay, so before we begin on that, we still want to listen to a little bit of Richard's story, how he came from establishing one of the earliest stablecoins on the markets to what he's developing now with AI. So Rich, would you mind sharing with the audience a bit about myself?
Sure, thanks a lot. Hi everyone, my name is Rich Teo and super happy to be with you guys today. My journey in crypto and industry started around 2011. We incorporated, I co-founded Paxos, which was incorporated in 2011. And since then, we've built that company into a globally regulated crypto firm. We've done crypto brokerage, crypto exchange, and many years ago, before it was called RWAs, we had a tokenized asset division. The world's largest, I believe, still tokenized gold is on us, and we've launched quite a few stable coins, including stable coins for Facebook, PayPal, and exchanges like Huobi and Binance. And of course, some of our own stable coins as well right now. We got our first license in 2015. That's the NYDFS trust license in 2015. And we launched stable coins in a regulated manner around 2018. And we've had quite a few stable coins that were successful to date. So in terms of the journey, it's been quite exciting. In the early days, there was a lot of issues with crypto. There was a lot of confusion. A lot of education was needed, and then there was a long journey of dealing with how we can build and trust with banks. The fiat layer has always been extremely important in the industry, and of course, dealing with regulators and helping regulators understand crypto a lot better. So there's been a lot of movements and shifts in the industry, and now it's very exciting because we're at the stage where I think that global regulators understand crypto quite well, and that took north of 10 years. And more and more banking institutions are getting involved and more interested in crypto with that growth. So I think it's the best time we've ever seen in crypto to be building not just Web3 businesses, but also real world businesses, and how that linkage could really help everyone.
Thank you, Rich. I think that was a great journey. And a lot of the journey Rich has put in a lot of hard work into the industry, making him one of the most established industry leaders. So we're really very lucky, all of us here, to have him around today. So Rich, actually I have the next question for you. The topic today is money reimagined. So we have been hearing this, I think, through my career, which is just a short 4 to 5 years in the crypto industry. We hear that a lot. So money reimagined. What is exactly broken or needs to be fixed in the traditional financial system that stablecoins can come in to help improve on?
So, it's when people talk about stable coins and crypto, we can transact very fast, very cheaply, frictionlessly throughout any users in the world. And I think that, when we think about it, everyone seems to think that it's a price or speed issue that we're trying to solve for. But the reality of it is that most of this slowness and cost in the industry is largely driven, it's not really a bug, it's a feature of the system. And it's important to think about that as we kind of build the new layer on top of it. So, if we imagine a world where people can very safely, quickly, frictionlessly transact throughout the financial system, we'll need to really solve for things that are very expensive in the financial system today. The first one being consumer fraud detection. The second one really being regulatory requirements that, domestic jurisdictions or anything else would require, and that's very expensive to do. Then, of course, there's the security and risk involved with every single transaction. And that's what really, costs a lot of money in today's payments banking systems. And I think that the future of money needs to basically more efficiently solve for those expensive, costly things, and not just simply fast movement of money.
I think Rich raised a very good point for the audience today. There are certain rules and regulations put in place that slow things down for the traditional banking system. They are there for a purpose. They are there for the protection of assets for each and every one of us. They are also there to protect the transactions that cross border for institutions in billions of dollars every single day. So while we think about innovation and how we can make things faster, cheaper, do we really only care about time and cost? Or do we really care about the safety of funds? So I'll leave the thought to you guys on that. And I also want to check on the next topic, which is relating still to stablecoin. It is not known and it is not a speculative asset. So differently from your Bitcoin, Ethereum, right? Stablecoins do not make you a billionaire or a millionaire in the next 5 years. So, Rich, where do you see the most interesting or impactful and powerful real-world use cases in stablecoins today?
I think stablecoins are used a lot in cross-border payments today, and it's very efficient for trade financing as well. I think that what people have been talking about the most, which I think would be very exciting, is actual payments, and that involves getting a lot of traditional payments companies involved, the banking system involved, and I think the future of it would be that stablecoins would be the main means in which people transact online, whether it's today in the Web 2 world or in the Web 3 world, and many iterations in the future. I think that could be the building blocks of payments. And really, it's just limited by imagination right now, every single thing that stablecoins can do, and a lot more functionality that can be built into it.
Thanks, Rich. So we were at the dinner yesterday night, and we were just having these conversations around how we had to change Vietnam dong before arriving in Vietnam today. We are from Singapore. So very thankful for our colleague who is sitting off stage right now. She actually reminded all of us to change Vietnam dong. So we were imagining a world in future where everyone can come to Vietnam, swap their USDT, USDC, whichever stablecoin they have and wish to hold, into a Vietnam dong-based stablecoin. And this stablecoin would then be accepted at merchants, both on and offline in Vietnam. So the same works for you guys when you visit Singapore or anywhere else for conferences, events. Imagine the convenience and time saved for you to travel anywhere you want with the dollars right in your wallet. Okay, so coming back, I want to speak a little bit more about regulations, risks, and the stablecoin environment. We have seen like the industry, especially for Rich, he has seen the industry through its nascency. And for that, there is a lot of regulatory developments that happen over the past 10 years, right? So from the regulatory front row, how has the landscape changed since your Paxos days? And are we really moving towards convergence or divergence in the global landscape?
I think it depends on what area of regulation. Globally, what we've seen converging is what are the basic rules of stablecoins and what keeps stablecoin assets safe, and what the composition of the backing of stablecoins should be. So back in the day, we always had to explain to people the concept of bankruptcy remoteness. That's a lot more easy to understand right now. Stablecoin issuers should generally be issuing from a bankruptcy remote company. So if the actual company collapses, the holders of stablecoins are safe. And now there's more or less standard rules in which what you should be backing your stablecoins with. U.S. Treasuries, if it's U.S. dollar-based stablecoins, and what are the further rules on that make sure that client funds are saved, and what is the acceptable level of disclosure. And I think what is converging more or less is the types of currency. So as it continues to grow, more countries are adopting, I guess, more protectionistic views on how stablecoins should be. Many countries don't want dollarization of their domestic economies. So that aspect of it is converging, just like how I think currencies generally view that. But it's something that will have to balance over time.
Indeed. So regulations, I guess you guys have been here since the morning. So Vietnamese government and all governments around the world, they are actually very forthcoming in how they view regulations around the developments of the Web3 economy. And I think more and more, each country's developments have been pretty positive. So we actually look forward to what Vietnam's developments will be in the next coming few years and working with you guys a lot more. All right? So one question for the builders in the audience today. Rich, what do you think, is there one or a couple of things that builders often overlook when they are developing stablecoin infrastructure or payment infrastructure projects?
I think that based on a lot of projects that are coming out right now, I think it's quite obvious that when you want to grow money, you need distribution networks. I think that that has been very narrowly defined for a lot of builders today. I think distribution networks shouldn't just be one partner with a lot of accounts. Fundamentally, when you think about building a stablecoin, it's like building a new form of money. It's more of a platform business than it is a distribution business. So, I think that I see more and more stable coins either being linked to a single large distribution platform or one core theme. And I think that's not so easy to grow. So thinking about it more from a distribution standpoint would be advantageous.
Indeed. So in Vietnam, we have come upon quite a lot of partners through Viction's introduction. And there are a lot of projects that are currently built on-chain right now around DeFi, around gaming, around payment infrastructure. So this is something that we all have to keep in check and keep in note while we are building. So an idea is great, as we have been in the industry for a while. There are a lot of great ideas out there, but this question, which is very well answered by Rich, really helps you to understand a little bit on what is the missing piece. What are you not thinking about yet? Okay, so hope that gives you some thought. And the next question will be for Rich, actually, because Rich is currently with Zark Labs, which is building AI tools in order to enhance blockchain infrastructure even more and make it even smarter. So for Rich, how do you think this AI infrastructure and tool that you are currently building intersects with the stablecoin infrastructure? And is there a point in future where AI will come on to regulate, or it will come in as a very powerful tool to govern on-chain financial systems?
So I guess, basically the evolution of stable coins has been freedom of money stable coins, very well-regulated stable coins, algorithmic stable coins, yield-bearing stable coins, which is proliferating today. But I think the future will be smart money and smart wallets. And when I say that, I just mean that money that knows not to get hacked, money that knows not to be involved in a scam, money that can audit a protocol before it arrives, and money that can always find yield and do what you want it to do. And with that, because of the nature of blockchain, AI can basically apply that and make money much safer for future use.
Absolutely. So money has transformed in various ways. I think from the history of money, we have seen like how gold, even seashells, right, barter trading, has been used as a transfer of value between people with business or personal interactions. So it has now advanced to the stage where stablecoins can be an on-chain transaction value of money, but also in the future, like what Rich mentioned, the money will grow even smarter. So we look forward to developments in that space, and I think as a community is somewhere that we are all heading towards. And then the next question would be pertaining to stablecoin settlement. So I think time is up. But maybe just the final one for all the guys in the room. If we were to each give one piece of advice to the builders in this room on designing the next generation of money, what would it be?
I'll be quick. Money is just a very sensitive thing, and I think that a lot of people want to go big, go global quickly. But I think if you understand your audience in a particular jurisdiction and build something that makes sense from a smaller community, a smaller standpoint, and find that niche, I think that's a lot better than creating a stable coin that you hope everyone in the world would use immediately.
Indeed. Actually, I have the same piece of advice. Just very coincidentally, we did not rehearse this through. But what we think is all your stable coins and your infrastructure should be built with global connectivity, but hyper-localized in existence, payment behaviors, user habits. So with that, we hope to see more of you guys and the interesting projects that will come forth from Vietnam. And we look forward to having you guys around in Singapore Token 2049 as well. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Richmond. Please remain on stage for a photo. And ladies and gentlemen, let's put another big round of applause for their contributions. Thank you. Thưa quý vị, sau phiên Fireside Chat vừa rồi thì ngay sau đây chúng ta sẽ cùng nghỉ giải lao trong khoảng 15 phút. Và quý vị có thể tranh thủ cơ hội này để thư giãn hay là kết nối với các quý vị khách khác. Và chúng ta sẽ gặp lại nhau với những phiên tọa đàm tiếp theo đang chờ đợi. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be taking a short break for about 15 minutes. And you can take this opportunity to relax and also have a chat with other fellow guests. Thank you very much and see you back here in about 15 minutes.
infrastructure for decentralized capital markets, specifically within the Solana ecosystem. The keynote topic is Building the Liquidity Layer for Solana's Internet Capital Market. Quý vị thân mến, tiếp theo thì trong chương trình chúng ta sẽ đến với một keynote hứa hẹn mang đến góc nhìn chiến lược về cách xây dựng hạ tầng thanh khoản cho thị trường vốn phi tập trung, đặc biệt là trong hệ sinh thái Solana. Xây dựng lớp thanh khoản cho thị trường vốn Internet trên Solana. This keynote will delivered by one of Vietnam's prominent figures in DeFi. Và người mang đến chia sẻ này sẽ là một trong những gương mặt tiêu biểu của DeFi tại Việt Nam, Miss Linh Nguyễn, CEO of Saros. Let's welcome Miss Linh Nguyễn to the stage.
Hello. Hi. This stage is actually quite awful. I've never seen my face this big before. I'm going to start with a little bit of an introduction on myself. I started in crypto in 2019. I started at FalconX, which is a bootcamp of crypto to me. Back then, when I started, there's like two main liquidity providers for wallet. One is BitGo, the second one is Ledger. Back then, when I do transferring assets, I copy and pasting address. The concept of whitelisting wasn't even a real thing. Shortly after that, I joined Alameda, and then FTX US as head of settlement. We're at the peak of our success, like we were serving like over 1 million users on like centralized exchanges. And then in the end of 2022, everyone knew what happened. Shortly after that, I joined Cube. They are a hybrid centralized exchange with an MPC, it's all like MPC wallets. Why I spend a lot of time talking about my background? Because it's quite relevant to the whole topic right here. At Cube, I oversee 100 listing of different tokens. I've seen a lot of fuck-ups. I've seen a lot of what we call the right thing to launch a token. This topic right here is gonna be about, where was it? Oops. The animation stuff. Anyway, building on-chain liquidity for builders. This is gonna be not as techy, not as cool as anyone expected to be. For my first day being CEO, I really want to find the issues and then announce the mission statement of the company to the audience here, but also to my team and myself. We really want to identify the issues that's happening in the DeFi space, and also then identify the solution. So we're on a DEX on Solana. Why Solana? My team actually told me not to put this slide up because it's like, they're like, wow, you're saying the things everyone's saying. It's silly. But then in my own experience, once a month I get a project or like a founder calling me and ask me, hey, we want to launch this project on chain XYZ. Should we? And then my next question was, how big is the grant? Do they actually have users? The problem with launching a chain with no user is that you need to make sure the product's not only getting its own user, but you also need to make sure the chain get users. It's almost like swimming against the current. When the chain doesn't have users, you have to do double the work. So that's why we love Solana, because I've been in the ecosystem long enough. I know all the builders. I know that the ecosystem provides enough infrastructure for a project to launch and to be successful. Launching a project here is so fucking difficult. It's not an understatement at all. I've seen a lot of founders launching a project put so much work, easily a year to 6 months, to make sure the project is successful, but it's failed. There are multiple reasons to it. Liquidity, market maker, narrative, and also distribution. When you launch your tokens and a few holders control most of the supply, they can easily dump and pretty much like destroy the whole project. And then maintaining it is even more difficult. I've had people telling me, hey, I've launched a successful project, but now I'm losing sleep because we can't maintain it. The failing reason is mostly liquidity dries up, you run out of narrative, and working with market makers is a pain. Like you always make sure you always have to talk to them and make sure like they meet their KPIs. So, like I said, I've overseen like the listing of over 100 projects, and I quickly realized that without a strategic liquidity infrastructure, early momentum will die. So that's what Sarah strives to be. We want to be the partner of projects. We want to guide you to success. We've seen too many fuck-ups. And we also have a network of good builders, good market makers, and we are a good platform for projects to launch their liquidity on. Does the animation play? Okay. So, this is Sarah's. We spent a lot of work into this animation, so hopefully you like it. What are we? And then what makes us different? We have a very well suite of well-structured technical solutions from AMM, DMM, and CMM. But what's more important than that is that we have a team of people who really care about making sure that you're successful. So when you launch with us, we can help with tokenomics advisory, liquidity initiation, and then distribution partners. After you launch, we also want to make sure you grow with us. We want to help you with optimize your liquidity, current campaign, and amplify visibility. Here's a case study. This is on your right. It's actually what I call a failed execution right here. Went sky high and then got dumb. The second one is actually not as successful, but at least people won't call it dumping. So, again, going back to the issues, a lot of projects have failed to launch. We want to make sure that all serious projects deserve more than just pool. They deserve a very well-designed support ecosystem, a very strong liquidity layer to build for sustainable growth. Here's a good story. On my second day being CEO, I called a friend, and I asked him, hey, like, what should we build now? Like, I have all the resources to build a successful DEX. And then he said, Lynn, the DeFi space in Solana is like a cancer. It depends on which part of the cancer or which kind of sickness you want to be a part of. And on my second day, I was shit scared. And then, as being here like in crypto for 6-7 years, I really want to do the right thing. I really want to support the right builders. I really don't want to support short-term pump and dump. And it's go back to our mission. We want to continue to support builders. One of our first initiations we're going to do is we're going to allocate 100,000 of our budget to support hackathons. I want to really go back to the roots of like Solana ecosystem. They have really good builders. I want people to really focus on a solution that's actually is going to make a difference. I want people who identify the problem first and then find a solution instead of building a projects and then identify the issues that project's gonna fix. I also don't want PvP. I don't want a project that's like slightly better than like what's already offering out there. I really want people to be creative with their solutions and really think about what's adding value here. And we really do have resources to make sure it happens, and we also have the platform to implement changes. And crypto has been really boring in the last few cycles, so we definitely want to make sure it's going to be fun for a lot of us. And then we would do, like myself, I really want to stay in this. I really want to make a difference. So this QR code right here is for people who show interest, and then for people who want to partner with Saros. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Linh Nguyễn, for such a dynamic and forward-thinking presentation. Cảm ơn quý vị rất là nhiều và cảm ơn Miss Linh Nguyễn. Bây giờ thì xin mời sóng trực tiếp của chúng ta sẽ quay trở lại.
Xin được trân trọng chào đón tất cả quý vị khách quý đã quay trở lại với sự kiện Conviction 2025. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thưa quý vị, tiếp nối hành trình của chúng ta thì chúng ta sẽ cùng tiếp tục với chủ đề stablecoin, và phiên tọa đàm tiếp theo sẽ mang tên gọi Hạ tầng stablecoin, kiến trúc ngầm định hình tài chính mới trên Internet, nơi mà những diễn giả của chúng ta sẽ phân tích cách stablecoin đang thay đổi hệ thống tài chính, từ thanh toán, kiều hối đến ngân hàng, và điều gì sẽ giúp chúng phát triển ở quy mô toàn cầu. Ladies and gentlemen, in the next panel discussion titled Stablecoins as Infrastructure, the quiet rails of the new financial internet, we will explore how stablecoins are transforming everything from settlement to remittances and what needs to happen to truly scale adoption globally. Và ngay sau đây chúng ta hãy cùng chào đón lên sân khấu các quý vị diễn giả cũng như người điều phối phiên tọa đàm này. We would like to welcome our moderator, Jay, BD Management, Frax Finance, and our distinguished speakers, Moses Lee, Head of Asia, Anchorage Digital, Alex Lim, APAC BD, Head of Korea, Layer Zero, Ms. Quỳnh Lê, Regional Expansion Lead APAC Tether, Patrick Chu, Head of Business Development, Agora. Over to you, Jay.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. First time in Vietnam. It's a very lovely country, and absolutely happy to be on this panel with a bunch of stablecoin giants. And so, for the sake of time, we'll just quickly go over one person each, like a quick intro of what they do at the company and anything new. So I guess I'll go first. Hey, my name is Jay. Nice to meet you guys. I work at Frax Finance, and we're a stablecoin asset issuer. Our new flagship product, Frax USD, is a one-to-one redeemable T-bill-backed stablecoin. It was built top to bottom to be Genius compliant, and yeah, if you guys want to talk stablecoins, I will stay after the panel, and yeah, pleased to meet you guys. Over to you, Moses.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Moses Lee, and I'm usually based in Singapore, and it's fantastic to be here in Ho Chi Minh City with every one of you here. So, Anchorage Digital is a crypto-native platform that is purpose-built for institutions to participate in digital assets. In the US, we operate as a national bank, and in Singapore, we are licensed as a major payment institution. Our platform is a crypto prime services platform that includes many different aspects of crypto, including custody as a foundation, trading, settlements, as well as stablecoin issuance, and on-chain services such as staking and governance. We also provide the infrastructure for our clients to build their own crypto digital native products. Most recently, we helped Athena launch USDTB, which is the first and so far only Genius compliant stablecoin in US dollars in the US. So as the only federal chartered bank in the US, we're able to help our clients issue Genius compliant stablecoins right now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. My name is Alex from Layer Zero. I'm based out of South Korea. Been managing the business development in the region here in Asia, especially in the stablecoin and the gaming circle. Layer Zero is the world's largest interoperability messaging protocol that facilitates asset issuers, application builders, basically talk to each other over 140 different blockchains. So you can perhaps think of us as the Swift network of the blockchain, so that, again, if you're an application builder or an asset issuer, you can deploy your assets application across hundreds of different blockchains. Stablecoin is probably the most single important vertical for us at Layer Zero, in the sense that we have an omni-chain token standard called OFT, Omni-Chain Fungible Token. Think of it as like the ERC20 for the Ethereum ecosystem, except with OFT, asset issuers can connect with 140 blockchains, whether it's EVM, Solana VM, Ton VM, Move VM, so on and so forth. Right now, about 65 to 70% of the entire stablecoins by market cap are OFTs. As example, there's PYUSD by PayPal Paxos, USDT Zero, close partner of Tether. There's Wyoming Stable Token, which is the first US state-led stable token, as well as Ondo Finance, Ethena, so on and so forth. Outside of Layer Zero, in my spare time, I lead an organization called Asia Stablecoin Alliance, which is an open consortium and platform where we work with stablecoin issuers from 9 different countries in Asia: Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. I think it's the first time that I got them all right. So we produce research content covering the Asian stablecoin market landscape. We do a variety of different, we try to foster real-world use cases through things like podcasts, offline events, where we'll be doing a huge conference during KBW. Anyways, I think that's enough of an advertisement. Nice to be here.
Thanks so much for having me today. My name is Queenie, and I'm the only Vietnamese speaker in this panel, so please allow me to say welcome to Vietnam, especially Jay, who's the first time into Vietnam. So I'm currently acting as the regional expansion lead at Tether. Tether is the largest stablecoin issuer in the world. Currently, we have issued more than 160 billion of USDT on-chain, currently serving more than 450 million users from 190 countries around the world. We're also actively working with the regulators and policymakers from more than 40 countries across the globe, helping 140 law enforcement agencies in terms of bringing more transparencies and protections for the transactions with USDT. Besides USDT, we also issue another asset like Tidal Gold XAUT. It's a stable coin pegged to the gold price backed by the physical gold store in Switzerland, and also USDT Zero that partner with Layer Zero here. Really happy to be here today and so excited to talk about stablecoin in this panel. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Hi, guys. I'm Patrick. I'm the head of BD at Agora. We're an open partnership fiat-backed stablecoin issuer. Our main product, AUSD, is an institutional grade asset that shares rewards with our network. We have a custody partner with State Street. We use PwC for our audit, and we're looking to connect with more partners out here in Asia and globally. Thank you guys very much.
Awesome. Okay, so I guess we'll go on to the very first question. We'll just answer one at a time. I'll ask you first, Moses. So despite growing use, some say that stablecoin still hasn't gone mainstream. From your perspective, what are the factors holding it back? Is it compliance, custody, liquidity, or user trust? And what would actually accelerate adoption in this area?
So with stablecoins, I think for a lot of us who are crypto native and been in the space for a long time, things have been slowly. But I think what's really happened is with the Genius Act, it's happening all at once. It's not just the Genius, but Hong Kong passed their stablecoin legislation. I think that Singapore will follow shortly as well. So what's happening right now is the regulatory framework will roll out and stablecoin adoption will happen all at once. And all at once, I want to qualify this a little bit. It's not going to be everyone in the world having their own wallets using stablecoins. I don't really see a world where that happens, but stablecoins will be prevalent within the infrastructure of finance.
Over to you, Alex.
Yeah, I echo with what Moses said, but I think that the two largest barriers to the mainstream adoption of stablecoin is regulation and fragmentation in every sense. So when it comes to regulation, I mean that it's a blocker, not in the sense that it's a negative thing. I actually think that it's something rather positive catalyst. And if you look at the entire trading volume and the circulating supply of major assets in the world, like Tether, USDT, or USDC, over the past 4.5 years, it has always increased, regardless of whether how much of a bull or a bear market we enter into. And I think the biggest reason for that is that the major use case of the stablecoin was simply for trading or store of value. I think we're entering into a new phase where we can use stablecoins for things like commerce, forex markets, remittances. So in order for that to happen, I think the single largest change factor is going to be the regulation, right? So with regards to the regulatory frameworks and the progress that's been made through things like the Genius Act, the MiCA in Europe, or recently with the stablecoin ordinance in Hong Kong, I think are exactly the catalysts that we need to be progressed. And what I mean by the fragmentation is probably the less so positive thing, where I'm really trying to push things with our partners. We're within layer 0, right? So one, I am particularly very, very interested in the accelerating Asian stablecoins. Asia overall is an extremely fragmented market, and the geography. So I think that it's going to require all of these different countries to work together and discuss how we can utilize stablecoins for all the right reasons. And of course, there's the liquidity fragmentation, and I'm a little biased, and that's something that layer 0 can, of course, help. So I think those two are the biggest barriers.
Awesome. And over to you, Patrick. What do you think is holding user adoption back?
Yeah, I think the last thing to add on to other 2 points that are already brought up is basically abstracting away a lot of the difficulties around the blockchain. For a lot of Web 2 users out there, it's just it's complicated maintaining their wallet, maintaining the infrastructure, as well as controlling all these things, right? So it's really about making sure that the overall process is very easy. At Agora, we try to make sure that it's very plug and play for our users, and we might want to make sure that we are going to be essentially open partnership and sharing rewards with everyone that works with us.
Awesome, awesome. And Queenie, what part of the traditional financial system do you think stablecoins could realistically replace? Whether it's settlement, treasury options, or payment systems, or correspondent banking? And why does that replacement make more sense now than it did 5 years ago?
That's very interesting question. So at Tether, we believe that stablecoin will never create to replace the traditional financial system. They currently serve as the infrastructure to onboard millions of people into the world of digital finance. Stablecoins like USDT is currently exist to serve to provide the financial access to the unbanked and underbanked. And to increase the utility of digital currencies, and also to facilitate the seamless cross-border transactions. So we believe that stablecoin is currently trying to help in the regions and in the countries where those system, traditional payment system is inefficient or inaccessible for everyone. So for the last, if we go back to 5 years ago, sending money across the borders still mean going through a chain of intermediaries, waiting from 3 to 5 days, paying high FX markups or even like SWIFT fees. So this type of system is mostly designed for the big financial institutions or big businesses, not for the small and medium businesses and family who send $200 for their families back home. So I think now we're seeing a lot of change from the businesses and especially the freelancers. For example, in Vietnam, there are hundreds of millions of e-sellers currently selling the products on Amazon, Spotify, and Etsy. So they and also across the globe, we're seeing them trying to skip the intermediaries and switch to settle the invoice in stablecoin like USDT. So I think let me give you an example in terms of trade finance. So it will be good like to for the exporter and importer to actually switch to settle the invoice in stablecoin like USDT because it's instantly 24/7, it's transparent, and it reduces significance in terms of the cost. And for now, what I'm currently seeing, it happens where regulations like Mose and Alex mentioned, we don't really have the clear regulations in the country like in Vietnam, in Taiwan, but we still also see the movement. For example, Taiwanese business want to shift the products to the country with trade deficits like in India. People are increasingly want to use USDT as the payment, while the businesses in Taiwan cannot accept USDT because they are publicly listed company. So what they're currently doing is that rather than going through the intermediaries, we have the USD account in Singapore, in Hong Kong, or in Dubai. So the importer is currently onboarding with the virtual asset service provider in Singapore, paying them USDT, where the VAPs in Singapore kind of like issue the standby LC denominated in USD. And once the shipment is done, they can release the payment system in USD and working with the traditional bank to settle the transaction to the exporter in USD, normally still compliance that allow them to still file the taxes, clear the custom, etc. So I think things are changing at the moment than 5 years ago because rails are in place. We're seeing a lot of like local exchange and OTC make it easier to convert the crypto to fiat and vice versa. And also some platform like CoinPH in Philippines, BitCup in Thailand, or even the messaging app like Line Messengers or Telegram are making much easier for merchants to transact with stablecoin. So in short, I believe that stablecoin is becoming the global correspondent network that don't try to replace the traditional bank at all, but by routing around the inefficiency that the traditional system failed to resolve.
Okay, that was very well said. Yeah, and on the subject of change, stable coins are dominated by USD-dominated like tokens, coins. But we're starting to see more and more like Europe-based tokens, like Korean won-peg tokens, like especially in Asia as well. So like, what needs to be built for them to matter at scale, like in terms of cross-border payments? Moses first.
So my prediction is that at some point, every country is going to have their own currency stablecoin. Now, whether it's going to be a centrally issued CBDC or a private company issuing the stablecoin, that remains to be seen. But every country at some point will. Someone is going to make that happen. And when that does, then essentially you'll have the FX market gravitating toward that eventually. It's going to be a pull factor just because of the natural efficiency of the blockchain. One thing I want to mention about the blockchain is more on a philosophical level. Blockchain allows people who can't normally cooperate with each other to at least do commerce together. So you can be enemies, but you can still transact with each other. That's the amazing thing about blockchains. And the actual technical implementation makes it efficient and instant. So that's a point that usually gets lost in the message of like crypto, Bitcoin, speculation. But that's something to always keep in mind. And that's why I have a firm belief in the institutionalization of crypto, just because it's better in many ways. So what's going to happen? Many things are going to happen, as Queenie was saying. But I also think that things will happen in parallel on many different levels. So you have countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, and the US, Europe. They're far more along the line of financial sophistication using very, very old technology. And you have developing nations in terms of the financial infrastructure that would be able to skip ahead many levels of legacy technology and implement things in a much more efficient lower cost manner. So yeah, this is not like a one answer thing, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is lots of different things are going to happen in different countries, in different sectors. And so I don't think this stablecoin universe is going to be like a universal application of one theory to everything. There's going to be many different levels.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, in a variety of different sectors, verticals, services, and countries, I believe that just like a group of panelists here, which by the way are all close partners of Layer Zero, I think we all have a part to contribute to, whether you're an asset issuer, whether you're an infrastructure provider, and if there's any regulator out here, like thank you for being here, you matter a lot. So I think my first point is that we all should do our part. And something that Layer Zero can do and how we would like to accelerate the stablecoin space is by making sure that interoperability is solved in every single way. If you look at the evolution of blockchain in general, right, in the past, I would say 15 years since the arrival of Bitcoin, really the computational layer of smart contracts was accelerated through Ethereum in 2015. That gave a birth to a lot of different layer ones and layer twos. To date, there are about 300 plus layer ones and layer twos. And I don't think that that's inherently bad. I think that's fantastic for innovation because each of this network, I believe conviction is another layer that is very, very focused and engaged in Vietnam. We all need that. A lot of these networks in layer ones and layer twos have a use case for a specific target audience, just like how some of you prefer Android platform. I prefer Apple, iOS. Some people like Linux. We all need these different platforms. But it wasn't until the arrival of TCP/IP where a lot of these networks and databases and code bases were united into what we call the web today. And that is the role that Layer Zero wants to play, is to become the internet in the blockchain space by making sure that every single network, every single asset, every single application is being managed and used like a user or a builder is within the single environment. That is the mission that we have. And I think just like the spirit of this, a lot of these different sectors and types of builders and infrastructures that you run should do their parts in order to accelerate the mainstream adoption of stablecoins.
Yeah, while the U.S. dollar has traditionally always dominated across trade and in FX, 90% of the overall FX in the world is still transacted against a dollar. We kind of see that kind of transitioning to on-chain, but to Moses' point, we are also of the firm belief that there will be a lot of regional currencies that will be launching their own stablecoins. We're not really sure who's going to win, to be very honest with you, but we also do think that from the liquidity standpoint and on the on-chain FX standpoint, that's going to be a huge source of growth into the near future. We at Agora, what we're trying to do right now is to really work with different issuers across different geographies to really bring on-chain liquidity to life, and working with different blockchains and foundations to essentially create this into a reality.
And Queenie, in your previous answer, you mentioned that Southeast Asia constantly ranks among the highest stablecoin adoption. As builders on the ground, what's one underappreciated or surprising stablecoin use case you've seen emerge in recent times?
Hello. So from my point of view, I think one of the use case that I think is currently underrated and also going to get a lot of attention in the near future is definitely scan to pay function in stablecoin. So when I talk to our partners in other part of the world, like in the US or in Latin America or in developed countries, where card penetration is really high. And I mentioned with them, like here in Southeast Asia, we aren't using like QR code payment. We don't use card payment. So the card penetration here in Vietnam, I believe, is about 16 to 18% only. However, the QR code payment penetration is about 80 to 90%. Similar thing happened in Thailand. About 90% of people transact every day by scanning the QR code. In Indonesia, the same thing happened. The national Indonesian QRIS system is currently integrated into about 26 merchants across the country. Even street vendors, small shops, coffees, supermarkets, etc. So I think that by offering the stablecoin scan to pay function, it's going to really increase the adoption in terms of stablecoin in Southeast Asia. Let's imagine, for example, if like Mo's coming from Singapore, or even Alex coming from South Korea, you just need to use your payment app or like e-wallet that you already have, and then you just scan the QR code where the USDT is deducted in your wallet, and the local merchants in receiving the local currency, they do not need to understand about digital currencies or stablecoin at all. So everything is bringing a lot of benefits for both the users and also the merchant side as well. So I think that's going to be the huge use case in the future in terms of the retail adoptions.
Okay, awesome. And the next question, it's ironic because Layer 0 is here. So with dozens of issuers, multiple chains, and compliance standards, do you think that fragmentation is a threat to scale? And what needs to happen to keep stablecoins interoperable and usable across ecosystems? Do you want to take an act at this first?
My favorite question. So, I mean, I told you about, fragmentation being one of the barriers in the stablecoin adoption, right? Just imagine if we go back to the days when emails were invented and Gmail users are not able to write emails to, I can't even think of any other email providers nowadays.
Hotmail.
Somebody uses Hotmail. Okay, well, Outlook or Hotmail, right? So essentially, that's what Layer 0 is here to solve, right? So you can send any messages, whether it's value transfer or information transfer, logic transfer from chain A to chain B. I will say that fragmentation itself, in and of itself, inherently isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like I was mentioning earlier, there's a reason why there are all these layer 1s and layer 2s, and there's a reason why a lot of these stable coins, even if it's denominated in the same national currency, that they exist. They're trying to cater, hopefully, to a different mission, to a different target market, and that's extremely important for innovation. However, while that's fantastic for innovation, it's horrible for collaboration. You got all these different networks, platforms, and assets and applications. So what Layer 0 has been trying to solve with our token standard called OFT, and I know I'd mentioned the SWIFT network, how SWIFT works with dozens and hundreds of different banks around the world is that banks that are on the SWIFT network use something called money type, MT. So basically, when let's say Bank of America user wants to send money to a user in Korea Bank, KB, within the bank they have a code where they're trying to communicate with each other about this specific value transfer. Similarly, that works in the blockchain space, with the OFT standard. So it's a long way of saying that I don't think that it's stoppable, that more and more assets, more and more platforms and infrastructures are going to come. Layer 0 is going to keep doing our job in terms of connecting them all and make sure that they can communicate with each other in the most seamless and the cheapest and the safest way possible.
And over to you, Moses. Do you think fragmentation is a threat to scale?
Alex, that was a layup question for you, and you slam dunked that one. So fragmentation, I think everyone here would agree that it's not fragmentation, really, it's diversity. And you need diversity. There are fundamental economic reasons you need diversity. One size doesn't fit everything. However, having said that, everyone needs to work towards a standard. And so I think Alex was talking about the technology layer standardization. You could also argue that you need some form of regulatory standardization just to make sure everyone, as consumers, have disclosures as to exactly what's happening under the hood in terms of reserve management. So there's layers to that. And the most important thing is that overall, there will be movement more towards the kind of adoption where the end user doesn't really have to care. And so I think the industry will move more towards using whichever stablecoin that actually meets and fit for purpose for that region, for that use case. And everyone else on this stage and in the industry, we're going to solve the problem of making it smooth and easy to access.
Did you have anything you wanted to add, Patrick?
Yeah, it's good to have Alex on the stage, actually, to be honest. I mean, to this problem, obviously fragmentation is a key issue for all issuers, including Agora. So we're currently native on 13 different blockchains, and as we continue to scale and continue to grow our network, it becomes kind of unfeasible to be simply native everywhere and to support it everywhere. And we're also working with Layer 0 to continue scaling our network and grow AUSD.
On a side note, Frax is also working with Layer 0 as well. These guys are very efficient. Yeah, and with the sake of time in mind, here's the final question. You like to wrap things up? Like, when you look 5 years ahead, what do you think the future of stablecoins actually look like? And if there's anything like recent updates and like personal, like with your company, yeah, I'd love to know. Would you like to go first?
I was going to say $5. Just kidding.
USD to 5?
USDT to $5. No, I think that I was actually talking to Quinny about this right before the panel. I don't even know if it's going to take 5 years, but like right now, with so many different assets, you know, in the stablecoin circles, I think for a lot of us and even those outside of the blockchain space, stablecoins are being perceived as assets. And I think in the longer term, it's actually not about assets. It's an infrastructure. It's a new wave of how we do finance. It's a new wave of how we send money and receive money. So I am particularly interested in how Asian stablecoin landscape is going to evolve. I'm obviously biased as an Asian, but the reason that, for me, there are two reasons that I'm particularly interested in Asia. One, with 10 plus countries with major economies in Asia that are also interested in issuing their national currency denominated stablecoins, Asia is an extremely tough place to do business to begin with because it deals with every different language, religion, and people. So the market itself is fragmented to begin with. And yet, an interesting dynamic with that is that the entire continent runs on the digital economy because of a few super apps like WeChat, Grab, Kakao, and Neighbors of the world. So I think that whether it's a retail investor or users, we're very used to why we need something like stablecoin for a lot of ecosystems, right? So in 5 years, I see players like Grab, Samsung, you know, Alibaba that have the most amount of user trust and user data to make the most out of this infrastructure called stablecoins. So these are the two reasons why I'm extremely excited about Asian stablecoins. One last thing that I'll mention is that right now, US dollar is the single dominant, you know, national currency, obviously, within the stablecoin market. I think it's still around 95% plus. However, what a lot of people don't notice is that if you look across the top 10 stablecoins, largest stablecoins by market cap, in terms of national currencies, Asia makes up over 50%, right? So right now, there are 9 countries that have either already tried the sandbox license or even production license, or like Korea, where dozens of enterprise and publicly listed companies are fighting for IP patents for their stablecoin tickers. There's passion, there's a push for regulatory clarity, and I personally think that is far different than what's happening in the West. So that's what I'll say.
And Moses, you have the most philosophical takes on this panel. I'd love to know your opinion on what stablecoins would look like in 5 years.
So again, I'll go on the philosophical side, if that's okay for everyone. So right now, you'll find that most institutions will have 2 views on stablecoin. One will be defensive, and the other one is growth mindset. So you will definitely have current financial institutions that have a lot of vested interest in not adopting stablecoins. You also have institutions that see the value, as we all talked about, on what stablecoin brings to the real economy. So in 5 years, everyone's going to be in growth mindset.
Did you want to say something, Patrick?
Yeah, sure. Lastly, I think in my mind, I think stablecoins will become essentially invisible but completely essential. Very similar to like TCP/IP for the internet. I think it's going to essentially underpin the rails behind every single financial payment, while still being completely invisible to the user.
Yeah, and I believe that's all the time we have. So yeah, thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed this very thoughtful panel.
Thank you very much, Jay, for moderating the panel discussions. Thank you to all the panelists. We would like to invite you to please remain for a group photo. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a big round of applause. Thank you very much.
Our global automated trading group and deploy liquidity on and off chain, so right on topic here, as well as provide trading services and solutions to help on one side projects, but anyone involved with digital assets trading, enabling the markets with a service view.
All right, hey everyone, my name is David Zhang, not to be confused with the other David. I have two different stablecoin projects. So one of them is dTrinity. So dTrinity offers subsidized stablecoin borrowing in DeFi. And I also am the co-founder of Stably. We offer stablecoin as a service for institutions who want to launch their own stablecoins.
Hey everyone, my name is David Tai. I'm the co-founder and general partner at Kronos Ventures. We're an early stage VC fund targeting pre-seed and seed round deals in the crypto space. We've been investing since 2021 and happy to be here talking to people.
Hi everyone, my name is Yen Shan. I'm the head of APAC at Figment. So at Figment, we pride ourselves as the world's largest institutional proof-of-stake blockchain infrastructure provider. Right, we manage more than $15 billion worth of assets under stake, and we mainly target institutional clients and with our safe and reliable staking ecosystem. Right, so we look forward to work with all the institutional players here in Vietnam and to see what kind of value we can add in terms of on-chain yield and staking infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Great. So let's dive into the first question. So let's start with like an overview of the current market state. So last cycle, on-chain yield was driven by liquidity mining, inflated incentives, and a number of other areas. But now we've seen a slight transition this cycle, and especially in the last year. So I wanted to start, maybe Yinshan, maybe you can start talking about what the current market state of on-chain yield is and how it's changed since the last cycle.
Yeah, I think when we look at on-chain yield, right, a lot of these projects are kind of facing, I'll talk about the problems that I'm seeing right now, right, because that's really what is the crux of all the on-chain yield solutions and what they're trying to resolve. So essentially, the key problem here is the cold start problem, right? Where you see out there's a lot of battle-tested, proven strategies already that allocators are already invested in. So what would make them really want to shift over to something, a new project, for example, that is more, that's new, that's innovative, even if they have strong capital backing, right? So it's really on the incentive side, right? To be able to start these projects from nothing to something. Now, incentives is what I'm seeing, right? A lot of players are giving out incentives, but incentive design is even more important, right? So how can these incentive programs be encouraging stickiness, right? How can they be sustainable over the long term, right? So some good examples that I'm seeing out there are, for example, like Hyperliquid's buyback mechanism, right? So that's what I'm seeing that is much more prominent in the on-chain yield ecosystem, where they're actually generating revenue, right? So real revenue going into the assistance fund and providing that sustainable incentives. And what is driving that real revenue? Real use case, right? Where in short, Hyperliquid provides real, safe, reliable, fast, decentralized exchange ecosystem where the fees go to the users instead of the middleman. That's the value it adds, right? So at the end of the day, what I'm seeing on the on-chain yield market and what is successful ties back to this crux of real-world value add. Yeah. So hand over the time.
Yeah, David, if you want to jump in.
So I feel like this cycle has gone on for so long that a lot of us have forgotten about, one of the big sources of yield this cycle, which is like staking and restaking, right? I mean, I think that's kind of what kicked off a lot of the yield farming mentality from DeFi users in the past like 12 to 18 months, right? So you had, Ethereum staking, and then you had like, these other protocols launch their own LSTs, and then you had restaking. So for me, that was the biggest shift, right? We went from, Ponzi-nomics to slightly more sustainable Ponzi-nomics, I guess. But like essentially this opened up all sorts of new types of businesses, right? Now you have protocols who are dedicated to making, liquid staking or restaking products more efficient. You have, like yield loopers, which are basically doing like basis trades across these different yield-bearing assets. And, but this is just for native assets, right? Like ETH, Sol, Sui, whatever. But stable coins have kind of seen a similar surgence, I would say about 12 months later. So I think Athena really, kicked the trend and put it on the map. Now you have people who have started to realize, hey, why am I holding these non-yield bearing stable coins, losing money to inflation, which has been very noticeable for the past few years, right? As well as the opportunity cost of, just not doing anything with your money, when I could instead, hold SUSDE, or I can, provide capital for some, new yield-bearing stablecoin pool or something like that. So I think USD denominated yield, driven by these yield-bearing stablecoins, and native yield driven by staking and restaking, like that to me has been the biggest noticeable trends of this cycle.
I think it's super interesting. I just want to add a couple of shifts, right? So when the DeFi space started, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, right, the only forms of yield was I can take, USDT, put it on Aave and earn crypto native yield. What is crypto native yield? Is basically you have borrowers on the other side that are willing to pay a cost to borrow because, they don't really need the capital. They can take the borrowed capital and go trade on it. Now, it worked out well in crypto bull markets because the cost to borrow was very high and people are willing to pay those borrowing costs. I think Aave yields at one point in time, I think in late 2020, early 2021, were in excess of 10%, right? But what happened, when you hit a crypto bear market is the yields go down to extremely low. No one really wants to borrow. If no one really wants to borrow, right, your yields are de minimis. So what happened then? Well, there's a rising trend there where if you look at what's happening with interest rates, right? Interest rates are rising, which means that if I go and I invest in the real world, a risk-free rate, treasuries, right? I'm earning 4.5%, 5%, and people are saying, okay, so why can I not, transfer some of that onto the crypto space, right? So the rise of RWA yields, and I'm just talking about treasuries at the moment, but there's other forms of other RWA yields, right? Brings almost kind of like a hedge against what will happen in a bear market for yields, right? People will just offload from crypto native yields into RWA based yields, and many protocols are doing something like this, right? To what Yanshan is saying about incentivization, I think that should exist to bootstrap users, but me coming from like a traditional finance background, I always think that in the end state of a protocol, right, it cannot just be inflationary Ponzi-nomics, right, that'll sustain the value of your yielding protocol. So that's kind of like my 2 cents.
Yeah, all very good stuff, I would say that. As well, what we tend to forget is looping back. stablecoin and yield-bearing stablecoin brought what we'd say a DeFi revival, because all the way we were all looking back about that DeFi summer, and then all we've seen is bond schemes, really looking to farm balance sheets of institutional players, but in the end, there is no sustainability, exactly. Whereas here, yield-bearing stablecoins help to unlock capital, where, for example, they can be used as collateral. So in a totally sustainable way, on one side, I had what was first tokenized money market funds. They were not really doing anything on their own. People were like, oh yeah, okay, that's great, it's new, it's on-chain. But it didn't really solve anything more than what was off-chain. However, the moment you make a stablecoin that is backed by those money market funds, then that instrument can be used as collateral, either in other protocols or even to enable trading. Okay? And suddenly that becomes then sustainable over time, regardless of any additional incentive that's being chased. Yeah. And look at this. Now we see that 2 years, like 2 years ago, the overall yield-bearing assets market was about 600 million in TVL. It is now close to 9 billion. Billion, just to be clear, not million. So we see that growth is here, and it's because it's solving real problems in the industry. Now it's still concentrated. The next step, it's how do we scale this even further? Because out of that close to 9 billion, 6 billion is USDE, which did a phenomenal job. But then you have new players, and for example, those money market funds backed stablecoin, USDO, USYC backed by Circle. Everyone is looking at ways to just enable capital for people to redeploy.
Just to piggyback and ask another question on that, the fact that most of today's stablecoin yield is generated by US Treasury bills, and the performance is potentially about to change if interest rate change. What impact will that have on yield, and what impact will that have on the appetite of institutions and investors more generally?
Well,
I just want to interrupt. I think the framework of the question is a little bit incorrect because, and the reason is because of this, right? Because if you hold USDC, USDT, the ultimate user doesn't get the interest rate. It's the company, so for example, Tether or Circle, that gets the benefit of the interest rate. So in a declining interest rate environment, it just means that those companies, Circle and Tether, wouldn't earn as much, right? So, you know, like to meet the end user, as what David said, right? If you hold USDT or USDC, you don't really earn yield unless you go and you place it into a farming vertical, right? But on that end, it just means that, you know, instead of making, you know, I think Tether made like what, $19 billion in their first quarter, they're just going to make less, right? And I want to see competition because right now Tether and Circle are sitting in dominant position. They don't really need to spend the money to do any of these things. Sorry for the interjection, but I just wanted to add that framework.
No, that completely makes sense.
Well, yeah, and then they will have other revenue channels, right? Because at the end of the day, one thing an issuer controls, so first it will lead to more competition, I totally agree with that. And then at the end, you still have the mint and redeem mechanisms, and that's going to be your source of revenue. So it will push to be probably reasonable on the spread you take there to build a sustainable economic model, and yet introduce much more competition. And even for those main issuers, again, like Circle, for example, came up with USYC and then now redistribute the yield to its user base.
And I'll just jump on to restaking quickly, and yourself, Yinshan. So it's taken off very quickly over the last couple of years, going from an experiment to billions in TVL. But from your perspective and Figment's perspective, how are institutions approaching restaking today, and how is this changing? How do you see this changing moving forwards?
What I'm seeing right now is that institutions are cautiously approaching it, right? If you look at the value that it actually provides is that, okay, you are now staking your asset, be it Ethereum, Solana, is locked, right? It's locked in your vault or your custody. What else can you do? It's staying there, right? It's securing a protocol. Are you fully utilizing that capital? So I think this is what restaking hopes to achieve, right? Which is to allow that kind of, I would say, even dormant capital sitting there to be able to have greater productivity and secure more use cases in the blockchain ecosystem. Right, so that is the fundamental principle behind restaking, and that's what's the real use case, as I tie back to that. But there's still some, I would say, issues that needs to be looked at or at least evaluated, right? So what are these issues? So, for example, like the complexity risk, right? Because when you are securing more and more protocols and applications, you're exposing yourselves to more slashing risks. Right, so your base layer has slashing risk, and then now you have additional slashing risk, right? But this can be mitigated if your operator is, okay, I'm talking about eigenlayer, symbiotic, your operator is well versed in running the infrastructure on the back end, being able to manage simultaneous different sets of rules and restrictions on a very systematic manner, right? And then of course you have smart contract risk, right? This is the major one. Many institutions, when I ask them to do restaking, that always comes back. So it's about the auditability, it's about whether it has been verified, whether it has been battle tested. So all these things are important for institutions, banks and all they're looking to get in, and treasuries as well, right? And of course, there are a few other factors like the yield right now is, I'm sure you guys are seeing the eigenlayer yield, symbiotic yield, is not the most attractive, I would say. But as more use cases begin to build, if builders get more innovative, tie it back to real world use case, I go back to there again, perhaps we can see some improvement going into the end of 2025 or 2026. Yeah.
And David, I'll bring you in here on the yield-bearing stablecoins again. Obviously, D-Trinity is building yield-bearing stablecoins products. So who are you targeting these products for? Who's the user base currently, and who do you feel like the user base might be in the next 5 years?
So I think so far, like the user base for yield-bearing stablecoins is still very niche. Like yes, the market has gotten much bigger than it has before, but it's still mostly people who already had money in crypto, right? And now instead of holding USDC, they hold something that pays them some yield so that they're losing less to inflation or opportunity cost or whatever, right? I think for like there to be true adoption outside of just the crypto community for yield-bearing stablecoins, I actually think there needs to be a vehicle for non-crypto people to gain exposure to this sort of yield. So like I don't think we're ready for this yet, but like an ETF that gives you access to like a basket of the top yield-bearing stablecoin yields, for example, I think could be a very interesting product, but it's still too early. Like I feel like yield-bearing stablecoins are like one cycle away from the level of adoption that institutions would need in order for them to be comfortable coming in, right? And that means there's actually a lot of opportunity space between now and then for builders to solve problems and acquire market share, right? So the trend that we noticed and why we started D-Trinity in the first place was because we noticed that people were only solving the problem of holding stable coins. So, instead of holding USDC, I can hold a yield-bearing stable coin. That's fine, right? But what if I'm borrowing USDC on Aave, right? Or what if I'm depositing USDC on Polymarket, for example, right? There are many use cases where you need the asset to stay pegged one-to-one, but you still want to receive the benefits that the issuer is keeping for themselves, right? So the main innovation that we created is, what if we incentivized users not to just hold the stable coin, but to actually use it productively in DeFi, right? So this is just one example of where I think some of the innovations are going to continue coming from. And by the time that institutions are finally ready to hold like very basic yield-bearing stable coins, I think the DeFi landscape will look nothing like it is today, right? So I think there will always be, this early cohort of early adopters, right, who are willing to experiment, and in return, maybe they get higher yields, maybe they have some cost savings or whatever, more leverage, there's a lot of degens in the space, right? But I think in order for, the late adopters, which are usually the institutions with a lot of money to come in, Like they need the space to be proven out, you know, probed in different areas, battle tested and whatever, right? It's just like restaking, right? Like it needs to have survived for long enough, have shown resilience, and have shown sustainability. And I think that's really what the industry is going through right now, which is why I think it'll be another cycle before we see adoption beyond the crypto natives.
And David, I can bring you in here. We're talking there about adoption just being a matter of time, I guess, like proving it's not failed for this period of time, institutions might come in. Do you feel like there's anything specific, UX or just general regulatory changes, anything like that that can accelerate this process or that can be done to accelerate this sort of wait and see process?
So a couple of things, right? There was actually a stablecoin legislation passed last year, which gives framework around what can be incorporated in stablecoins. And one of the things that they basically said was, if a stablecoin actually bears interest, it's counted as a security, right? Which means you know, but then that gives rise to people, you know, like, okay, well, what do you do with the interest that accumulates, right? Well, for Circle and Tether, they don't really need to give that much away to their partners or anyone, so then they can like figure it out for other business purposes. But for newer stablecoin projects, right, some of them are basically saying, okay, how do we incentivize the partners to develop our ecosystem, right? Because we can't really give it away, right? And that'll just give more market share for these tokens and all of this, right? It still remains to be seen whether the incumbents meaning USDC or USDT, would you know, maintain the level of market share that they have. I think that on the market capitalization basis, right, I do think that there may be challenges. Already USDC is getting a significant amount of market cap share, but from the trading perspective, I think USDT is in a dominant position. I think, you know, more than 90% of trading pairs are all USDT dominated. Now, what do I see for the future? I think it's an adoption game. I think the stable coin with the vast amounts of resources that can incentivize the most amount of partners, which ultimately means, well, how much is their collateral and how much are they making and how much are they further incentivizing all of those partners, right? I recently, you know, spoke with, you know, the head of strategy at World Liberty Financial regarding kind of USD1, the stable coin there, and just to kind of get, you know, what they're thinking about. And not only are they kind of, you know, attacking the market cap regime, they're also attacking kind of Tether's dominance on trading pairs, right? They want to be listed on exchanges as trading pair counterparties. So it'll be like, you know, USD1, BTC trading pairs. You know, so the TLDR it still remains to be seen. Marketing and adoption is highly relevant because that'll just increase market share, which increases the earnings potential, which means they have more resources to, you know, to inject into their ecosystem, right? Yeah, that's how I think about it.
And Arthur, I don't know if you had any thoughts on this one from an institutional perspective.
Yeah, to take it a bit broader as well, because we always think about institutional adoption, thinking actually financial institutions. And I think for stable coins, we forget something, it's just digital FX. And then the moment the corporate world really gets involved in terms of the volume of trades and really challenging what is the FX landscape as it stands today. And I think for that, we're actually very close. Go talk to a CFO that has to manage multiple currencies and reserves across various continents and the associated hedging risk that they have, the cost of managing all of this compared to basically sitting on reserves that generates yield, and without changing the risk profile drastically, as soon as, again, you don't go into those looping that we talked about, it's very much something that any CFO will comprehend. And I think right now that BD effort is just starting, and it's already showing, like I think now we are like 4x the volume just traded on stablecoins to stablecoins from 24 to 25. And that's gonna accelerate. And part of it for me is this corporate adoption, so just real money pouring in. So while it's institutions, it's a given, they are in. And then the next step is the broader corporate adoption.
And broader corporate adoption looks like what in the next couple of years?
Meaning, again, like a real alternative for facilitated multinational trade, regardless of thinking crypto per se, but just bringing efficiency on those conversions, bringing efficiency in those transfers, those wires, and in the meantime, bringing back treasury efficiency back to the guys who are holding the assets.
This is a very interesting point. I just want to add on a little bit to that point on treasury efficiency that you mentioned, right? Which is something I'm seeing as well in the ecosystem, right? If you see a lot of treasuries out there, it can be corporate treasuries, it can be asset managers, it can be, you know, Bitcoin miners that are managing their wealth of Bitcoin, right? A lot of them are looking a lot into the staking ecosystem, right? As a first step, but then what next, right? So on Ethereum, you're generating around 3 to 4%. On Solana, you're doing, 8%. But then how else can you kind of make that strategy more efficient, right? So looping strategies, like what Arthur said, structured products, right? Derivatives on top of staking, right, is, I think, something very interesting as well to all these asset managers. So, for example, D-Trinity's D-Trinity's staking vaults 1-inch Opium integration. I think these potential, interesting elements for a lot of these asset managers, treasury managers out there in this current market. Yeah.
Did you have a thought on that, David? I saw you raise the mic.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of institutional adoption of, crypto treasuries, right? You have the rise of digital asset treasury companies, right? It started with kind of MicroStrategy, and now, there's the Ethereum Bitmine. There's a new chairman, and now Ethereum Bitmine actually owns the greatest single holder of the greatest amount of Ethereum, right? We'll see more and more in the near term the rise of these type of companies, right? And the way that it's interesting is if you actually buy the stock of these companies, they're trading at a multiple of NAV, net asset value. And the reason why they're trading at a multiple of net asset value is because of two components. The first component is, well, there's an expectation that they're going to actually buy more, buy more Bitcoin or buy more Ethereum in the future, depending on what they're doing. That's one. And then two is they're also not just fully buying and holding the Ethereum. They're also allocating into certain fund managers that can generate Bitcoin on Bitcoin yields and generate Ethereum on Ethereum yields. So it amplifies kind of that return profile of the underlying asset, right? And a lot of people, even a lot of ventures funds, we're studying this, examining this, right, just to see where this will turn out. And I do think that more and more, as crypto becomes ingrained in everyday culture and all this stuff, right, you're going to see more and more of an allocation of traditional companies into crypto assets, whether it's in the traditional realm, which is basically, I want Bitcoin exposure, so I'm going to buy Bitcoin ETFs, or the native route, which is I want Bitcoin exposure, I'm going to go and buy Bitcoin on the native chain, right? Or I'm going to buy a wrap, asset of Bitcoin or something, right, to avoid the asset management fees. So that's kind of like my take on what's happening.
And the treasuries that you mentioned, if a bear market downturn happens and yields go down, how do these treasuries start?
Sure, that's a very, very good question. So you should basically study the capital structure of some of these digital asset treasury companies, right? And we actually studied this. So in the beginning phases of MicroStrategy, for example, they were highly levered. They were basically borrowing money and buying Bitcoin, right? Now, the issue with that is if there's debt covenants meaning, okay, well, if I'm a smart debt investor and I issue a debt instrument, right, I will basically say, well, if Bitcoin drops below a certain price, right, I'm going to get control of the equity of the company, right? What happens is the equity will get wiped out upon a decline of a certain percentage point. It's akin to getting liquidated, right, but on a corporate scale, right, on a very, very high level. That's how you think about it, right? But when you look into the capital structures of MicroStrategy now, it's actually not levered, right? And when you actually look at, for example, Bitmine, and you look at their acquisition strategy, they raised $250 million to acquire Ethereum, but that was a common equity raise. It was not a debt raise, right? So in cases like this, right, you're going to suffer less chances of liquidation. But the counter to that is, okay, I am investing in a vehicle that's basically Ethereum, but within that company, you're going to have incremental expenses because you got to pay people salaries and all of this stuff, right? But you're betting on the fact that these guys will know how to allocate into optimal yielding strategies that will earn Ethereum on Ethereum yields, right, greater than the expenses that they have, right, to make sure that the multiple NAV makes sense, right? Otherwise, it's like, why are you paying a multiple net asset value, right? So that's an interesting point where we kind of like studied as well, right? Less chances of liquidation now, but before, definitely a chance of liquidation, especially if there's debt on the capital structure, right?
Yeah, for sure. We have only a couple of minutes left, so I think it's time to wrap it up with some final thoughts about what the next couple of years of on-chain yield looks like, which products will be the most popular, and how this will look in from an institutional perspective as well.
Well, on our side, very interestingly, we feel another wave of adoption is looking at a new way of wealth management. Essentially, what we've seen is the distribution of structured products in the 0 to 5 years, as the way your financial advisors will be distributing it. The back end being what we've just described, so vaults of different risk profiles to the various stage. Managing on one side a cost of borrowing, then the yield that you can generate out of various, for example, even not just trading, lending, borrowing, then derivatives, right? You had OTC derivatives on top of that, and then build different strategies as structured products. Will be bringing probably the next wave of adoption for us from a grand public point of view, beyond crypto.
So I've been in the stablecoin space for 7 years. I don't think stablecoins are going to go away, right? I think we're going to continue to see increasing sources of stablecoin yield. So earlier, one of the questions was, what happens during a bear market when crypto native yields go down, right? I actually think this is where RWAs and bringing in traditional finance yield will help buffer that shock a little bit, right? So maybe now I rotate out of my SUSDE into like a, tokenized treasury, vehicle or something, right? So I think the stablecoin yield space will continue to mature. LSTs and, restaking is not going to go anywhere. I think the big category that's been growing that hasn't gotten a lot of attention is fee-based tokens, right? I mean, like Hyperliquid, but many DeFi protocols are starting to actually show like real revenue, like a business, right? This is what they promised in their white paper, like who knows how many years ago, but it's finally starting to play out, right? So you have, DAOs like Aave, like, Maker, which is now Sky, et cetera, right? Like they're starting to show real sustainable business models beyond just printing tokens out of thin air. And I think this trend will continue, and the bar for what makes like a high quality DeFi project is going to increase, every cycle. So I think that's going to be one of the new emerging trends. And then, of course, there's going to be some crazy thing that none of us can predict here that's going to take everyone by surprise, right? So, but in terms of the foundations, I think, stable coins as always, native yield is here to stay. And I think, real revenue generating project tokens are also going to start coming more and more.
David, any final thoughts?
I think David covered, this other David covered a lot of the, some of the points that I would raise as well, right? If I were to kind of project out like how yields will work in the crypto space or yielding protocols, right? I would also include, when people say like on-chain yields, I want to also include the bucket of if I have stable coins on a centralized exchange, right? And I want to easily get yield on that stable coin, I can easily just click a button and basically lend that out and get that yield. It's not on-chain, but I would argue that it's as easy as kind of like, on-chain yield. All of these verticals, right, of yield sources and all of this will exist, right? The difference is where users will go depending on the conditions of the market environment. And, I think we both touched upon this, right? In a bull market environment, when people are willing to, pay 10% to borrow USDT and USDC, you're going to see more and more people use crypto native yields. In a bear market, when, no one wants to borrow and therefore there's no yield there, right? People are going to flee over to RWAs because they can earn the 5% on the treasuries, right? who knows what kind of interesting other angles of yield there may be. I mean, Athena is one of them. It's a stable coin, but I considered it. I consider it. It's not a fully collateralized stable coin. The yield is generally higher than what you can earn on the treasury side, but the yield is sustained through structured finance product, right, on a very, very high level. Maybe we see more of those, right? Although the risk there is, we've all seen what has happened with pure algorithm stablecoins like Luna Terra, right? Which is something that we don't believe in, right? You can't just create money out of thin air with no collateralization. So yeah, those are kind of like my thoughts, but highly unpredictable how this will all play out.
Yeah, I think that the dominant kind of topic, and of course a lot of the dominant share of assets are still in stable coins. But if I were just to pivot a little also to the crypto native side of things, right? So you see the POS networks or even the current POW networks. We'll continue. What I expect to see is that staking will still remain as the fundamental, basic infrastructure of yield provision, right? Or for us we call it rewards provision, right? And on top of that, right, what I expect to see is that more and more innovative elements are being built on top of just staking, because that's what our clients, institutions are looking for. So we have to really look out of the box, find a way to tie that back also to our USP, which is providing security, right? So at the end of the day, what we provide is not a financial product, right? It's more of a technological type product where the risks to manage are unique. And how can we incorporate that into the financial world, where it's more about collateralization, it's more about providing yield, generating yield from counterparties? How do we amalgamate that? And that's what I expect to see. And what I hope to see, right, is real world use cases that is not in the realm of financial products, right? So for example, right, some interesting, I would say maybe not so prominent things that I'm observing is that, not so prominent to the everyday person that I'm observing, is that on Eigen layer, interesting AVSs are being built, Eigen Cloud, and on it Eigen Compute, where essentially it's like an AWS or Google Cloud providing a security bond to it. So pumping in millions and billions of dollars, and if you have a mischief or you alter the data, these dollars actually get burned. So there's a huge disincentive to make a mistake or to lie, basically. So that's the value that I hope to see crystallize coming out of this entire staking, restaking ecosystem that will actually generate sustainable, real-world on-chain use. Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you everyone. Thank you for listening. It's been super insightful and great conversation, and it sounds like we're right on the precipice of something that's going to be a major part of the ecosystem moving forward for a long time and moving into other areas. If you have any questions for anyone on the stage, grab them as they're walking out. Thank you, Figment. Thank you, Kronos. Thank you, D-Trinity. Thank you, Flowdesk. And I was from 1inch. So thank you all.
Thank you to all the speakers for such a dynamic and in-depth discussion. And now we invite all of you to stay on stage for group photo to mark the end of the very first day at Innovation Stage. Xin được gửi lời cảm ơn đến các diễn giả của chúng ta trong phần thảo luận vừa rồi. Và quý vị thân mến, bức ảnh chụp vừa rồi cũng đánh dấu cho sự kết thúc của ngày đầu tiên tại sân khấu Innovation Stage. Kính thưa quý vị, như vậy là ngày đầu tiên tại Innovation Stage, sự kiện thuộc khuôn khổ Conviction 2025, Ngày hội Công nghệ Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh 2025 đã chính thức khép lại. And just like that, we come to the end of the day one at the Innovation Stage, part of Conviction 2025 Ho Chi Minh City Tech Fest. Thay mặt cho ban tổ chức, Hồng Vân xin cảm ơn chân thành tới tất cả quý vị đã đến tham dự cùng chúng tôi và chúc quý vị sẽ có một ngày tràn đầy niềm vui. Đừng quên là chúng ta vẫn còn có hẹn với nhau vào 8 giờ sáng mai tại Innovation State Convention 2025. Thank you and see you again!